learn more about you. So there's going to be a poll that's going to go up, that's asking where you're coming from. So we'll give you a minute to fill it out. Oh, yeah, QR code. How do I can't answer that. Truly. I think I'm like an admin or something.
All right, BC.
I don't know. I can't even answer the poll. I'm like. Yeah.
Go back.
Scroll down.
We don't see the whole thing.
Are we able to expand it? See everyone?
Thanks, Sandy.
Well done, Jen.
There's some work to do in Saskatchewan.
Just keep Saskatoon, come on.
Are we meeting Ontario?
Yeah, it would be in Ontario.
Yes.
I want redistribution of that budget to reflect this.
I don't think that reflects Amber's.
I know.
We should be even farther.
Just getting answers. Are you, who's answering questions? Are you answering questions, Melissa?
I
No.
Are you answering?
People online having.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are the options for what you local keep?
Effective advocacy.
It's
Helps physicians become messengers for planetary health. Great community, excellent source of trustworthy information and content. Other.
I'm with the majority here.
Community. You didn't put Melissa wasn't even one of the choices.
I didn't hear what you said, but I heard my name.
I said Melissa is one of the choices.
Oh, God.
Watch your
The CBC
meeting.
radio program.
We're gathering a lot of that.
It's amazing though. There was more.
Are we
Muted? Maybe not. No.
We are unmuted.
We are unmuted. Good.
So we should stop, talking trash about.
Is there another question after?
Yes.
Two questions. I just heard it on the outside.
Strange. The one I did in May, yeah, no, this is just recent. The edges.
Sorry, the second poll results aren't showing you, but basically it was 33% effective advocacy, 48% was helps physicians become messengers for planetary health, and 10% great community, 10% excellent source of trustworthy information and content.
Just close the.
No one to shoot that.
I don't know what the problem is. There's the room volume that's not working.
Oh, this now. Not mistake.
I'm not through. That's down. You should down.
For those of you who missed the second question, also free to just put your answer in the chat if you want to share. And Melissa, do you want to take over from here? It's a very typical of a Cape doctor to both be hosting something and answering something else and probably doing a media interview at the same time.
Welcome to our lives. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna turn it over to Brenda, essentially, who's our 30th anniversary coordinator. And so I have some notes that Sabrina very kindly put together for me, so I'm gonna read them. So basically, we're doing amazing work here at Cape right now, but it really is built on the shoulders of 30 years of physician advocacy. So Brenda is gonna share a sneak peek at a promo video that's built around this, and she's also going to share a retrospective of the last 30 years. So go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm going to present on the 30th anniversary kind of in total, and I'm saving the little video till the end. That way I keep you all around. It's a little manipulation tactic. Can I speak up? Can you guys hear me okay? On my mic?
You're pretty quiet, Brenda.
Sound better? No? Oh, shoot. Hello? Yeah. I've got tech here.
Brenda,
I just want to say one thing, actually. We have a very special guest with us, and he joined us for the AGM, and he would just love to say a few words to everyone who's assembled for a Friends and Family meeting. Can we just take a pause for a second? Yeah, thank you. So I just want to introduce someone who needs no introduction, Dr. David Suzuki, who is essentially, grandfather of environmental action here in Canada, and he would like to say a few words.
Well, I'm not dying to say a few words. I was just wondering why I'm here. I started an organization in 1990 that unfortunately carries my name. I objected to it because I knew damn well what would happen. I'd end up having to worry about it even when I got to be an old man. But this year, we started the foundation in 1990. Environmental concern was at its height at that time. And we wanted to get at the deep underlying root causes of our environmental crisis. You see, over the years, we fought the proposals to drill for oil at Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And we stopped it a number of times. There were proposals to drill up in that area. My wife and I got very involved with natives in Brazil, and we stopped a dam by getting the World Bank to pull back a loan of $500 million for a dam. And we stopped in the 1970s a proposal to drill for oil. To build a dam at Site C on the Peace River. Now, of course, all of these things that we were fighting over the years have come to pass. Now we've got a president of the U.S. that says, drill, baby, drill, and you can be sure Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is where they've got their eyes. The dam at Site C on the Peace River, it's already built and come on to stream. And the dam that we stopped in the Xingu River in the Amazon is now built and bringing energy online. So what we celebrated over the years as victories, in fact, were Pyrrhic. They weren't real because we didn't change the basic mindset of involved in everything that we do. So this year I attended the opening kickoff to Climate Week in New York, in the States, in New York City. And Johann Rockström, the head of the Potsdam Institute in Berlin, announced his latest planetary health check. And every medical doctor should be concerned, it seems to me, about this, because from my standpoint, there is no separation between the environment and us. We are an integral part of the environment. And we're hammering the environment as if it's not going to affect us. Whatever we do to the air, water, and soil, we do directly to ourselves. Anyway, I hope that all of you know that Johan Rockström is a man who started this whole thing about planetary boundaries, looking at humans as another animal, as mammals. We are subject to the constraints of planetary factors that if we don't watch what the limits are to these factors, we're in deep trouble. So there are things like the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, the pH of the oceans, the amount of fresh water freely available, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle. So there are 9 boundaries beyond which we should not transgress those levels. If you exceed the boundaries, any one of them, you're in deep trouble, along with all other mammals, of course. At his announcement in October, he said 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries we've already passed into what he calls the danger zone. We're upsetting them to such a point that our survival is in great threat. And we're about to exceed the limits of a 7th boundary. So only 2 of the 9 boundaries we're staying within. And he says, and I don't believe it for a minute, he says we have 5 years when we could turn things around and get out of the danger zone back into the safe area in these 6 or 7 areas. I don't think that, looking at the record of our activity on climate change, there isn't a chance in hell we're going to be able to reverse ourselves. So I've been saying to my own organization, look, you've been carrying my name on this thing and I've been concerned about it, but let's face it, the environmental movement has failed fundamentally. We haven't shifted the conversation. I mean, look at the COP29, 29 meetings on climate. And they only 2 meetings ago, they put fossil fuels in the actual document saying this is one of the problems we face. That's how successful the fossil fuel lobby has been, keeping it off the agenda all these years. So, you know, now they're quibbling about the amount of money that the rich countries are going to make available to the countries that are being hammered already by climate change. So the thing I've been saying is that we should just pack up our bags, because my organization does not take government money. We do not take money from corporations. We depend on ordinary Canadians to support us, and they've supported us on the faith that we are going to be able to shift things to a level that is sustainable. I calculate we have spent over $200 million of public money in 35 years. And we have to say, we have fundamentally failed to come through with that. And Rockström's health report, if we don't pay attention to this and raise it to the highest level, and I hope that CAPE will be doing this as well, that unless we take that very seriously and declare an international emergency, then we're just going to do these bits and pieces, an incentive here, a tax there, the park here, and all that, as if somehow that's going to get us off the destructive path we're on. We're in a deep emergency. If we don't treat it the way that our government did during the COVID crisis, and COVID was nothing like the threat we face now with planetary boundaries. If we don't declare that, then we're fooling ourselves if we think this is going to get us off the path that we're on. So it's a heavy conversation, but we're just not having the conversation to recognize how deeply in trouble that we are. We're now talking about, you know, survival of our species, that extinction of human beings is a definite possibility. And, you know, when I hear some of your members are on paternity leave or maternity leave, I think, wow, you know, anyone with young children today knows our children don't have a chance in hell of growing up in the kind of world that we did when we were young. And boy, we've come up with a real time crunch. That's my message. I think unless all of us groups that are concerned about a future for our children can come together and demand a radical restructure and reshaping, the whole economic system, our political system, and our legal systems are all formed in a way that is supporting humans as a dominant creature on the planet without any acknowledgement that we are just one strand in a web of relationships with air, water, soil, and biodiversity. That's the challenge, is to shift the mindset from our sense that we are the dominant animals. And we can hammer the hell out of our surroundings without any consequences for us. That's crazy.
David, as one old codger to another who's founded an organization 30 years ago, I want to thank you very much for a strong and important critical dose of reality. Thank you. It's Warren Bell here.
And I want to say, you know, David, I guess Warren just cut you off. So I guess that's what old codgers can do to each other. I wasn't going to do that. But thank you for attending. And I just want to say the same thing, is that you're always so good at kind of telling us the truth in no uncertain terms. But I think the fact that there's a group of health professionals, extremely motivated physicians, who are working on the climate crisis, who are working on this planetary health and boundaries crisis, means that I think the environmental movement has a strong ally on its side. We know that health is one of the most effective frames to get people to support policy proposals. And I know you and I are talking pretty soon about a way to engage even more health professionals across Canada in this work. So thank you. Thank you for your work and your message. And it's motivating and bracing at the same time. But as doctors, we know how to, we know how to deliver bad news in a way that motivates people to change their action and choose the right course of action. So thank you. Thank you for being on our team.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to mention to you that David is on our honorary board, which we're very excited about. So we're always grateful to hear his advice and his thoughts. And certainly no movement is perfect. We know that. And in fact, we often have a lot to learn from where we failed, but we also have a lot to learn from where we've succeeded. And that those successes are important for us to understand that change is possible, and important for us to understand how we can move forward. So looking back at a bit of a retrospective, I want to pass it over to Brenda, who's going to talk about the CAPE's history, 30 years of work, advocacy, effort, and some successes. And that's a really great jumping off point for when we look forward. So Brenda, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let me share my screen. Oh, there we go. I just need to make sure I can share sound for the video at the end. So everyone can see that? Thumbs up, okay. I'd just like to very frankly start with an acknowledgement of the more serious tone. Some of you might have seen versions of this presentation before, talking about CAPE history. It keeps building and growing, but I usually take it pretty light. But I want to start with an acknowledgement that yeah, we're in a very difficult position as an environmental organization. The world is struggling, but there have been 30 years worth of people and effort who I've had the privilege of learning about over the last year of being here. The people who work at CAPE are so dedicated and so intelligent and so open to learning and growing themselves. And I think that we need to celebrate what we can And this is one opportunity to do that. This also isn't just a woo, pat ourselves on the back. I see the 30th anniversary as an opportunity to recommit to the work, to acknowledge what we've done, learn from the things that we've done in the past, our mistakes, our triumphs, and carry them forward with an understanding that we have support and community, and we have the skills that we need. And we have this whole organization full of incredible leaders who are prepared to do the work that needs to be done. So that's my disclaimer that was unplanned, but it felt pretty big of a shift in tone to go right into my presentation. So now I'm going to do that. So 30 years of CAPE. We've been leading the charge for environmental health for 3 decades. And again, that's something worth celebrating. So CAPE was founded by Dr. Warren Bell, Dr. Trevor Hancock, and Dr. T. Wadati. Warren, I already heard your voice today. I don't know if the other 2 of you are here. But the story, as I understand it, which every time I tell it, I do get an email correcting me on some details. So forgive me if I get something wrong again. But as Sabrina said, they met up in a coffee shop at one point, talked about this organization. Each of them had thought about how to advocate for environmental health, how to move this forward. And this conversation was the start of the organization. So why did they see a need for CAPE in the first place? So first of all, in the 90s, there were some surveys that were coming up showing that the public trusts physicians to talk about all sorts of things, not just their personal health. But going into number 2, a lot of physicians who were kind of rallying around this idea of CAPE felt that there was a real knowledge and skills gap, that physicians learn about the human body. They don't necessarily learn about environmental science always. Some, select incredible few of you do, but that's not always the case. And so there was a need to create learning opportunities and to imbue physicians with the skills to communicate and to advocate. And so coming into 3, there was a need for a dedicated forum for physicians to do that, not just for them to go into any old organization. With the privilege and power of this public trust, there needed to be a place that recognized that and knew how to mobilize that in a more focused way. And 4th, something that maybe we don't talk about as much, I don't know, but anymore. But at the time, there was no Canadian physician organization talking about the environment. But there were several around the world that had cropped up. And so I think there was a little bit of well, we can't be left out. So many people are doing it. We need to be part of this wave. And so those were kind of the 4 needs that I've found dug out that kind of motivated the creation of CAPE. So CAPE's original objectives, very closely linked to those first needs, were to educate physicians, again, to prepare spokespersons to talk about environmental health issues, to serve as a think tank, to come up with ideas, work together, collaborate, to provide a multidisciplinary forum. So CAPE wasn't just physicians from the beginning. It included environmental scientists, engineers, advocates, all sorts of academics, all sorts of professionals. And the idea was that it wouldn't just be physicians talking to them or them talking to physicians. It would be, again, a space for collaboration to fill the gaps that each person, each kind of group had. And finally, to advocate for certain positions and courses of action. So essentially advocacy, but I wanted to use their very formal wording that they had in those old papers. So a few major milestones. Another disclaimer, you very much might disagree with me on what the most major milestones are. That's okay. I highly encourage you to send me a very detailed email with sources about your favorite CAPE milestones. And that way I can use them in my work. So if you disagree, write me a report. I happily accept it and it will be integrated. So that's my disclaimer. Don't get mad at me. Help me do my job, potentially. So startup. As I said, 1993, the idea for CAPE emerges from our three founders. In 1994, on that note of lacking the international representation, CAPE is recognized as the Canadian member associate organization of the International Society of Doctors for the Environment, which was largely composed from what I remember of groups from European countries. In 1994, CAPE received its letters patent and was officially incorporated as a not-for-profit. So that's the whole reason for having this anniversary in 2024. Then in 95, the first meeting was held at the University of Alberta Faculty Club. And I included in our kind of startup period all the way up to 2004 when CAPE hired Gideon Foreman as our first executive director, or first paid executive director, which we were debating about upstairs during lunch, whether that's actually the case, but let's pretend that I'm 100% sure about that for the purposes of this presentation. And I include that just because from everything that I've read, CAPE was really pushing and full of so many dedicated volunteers. But when Gideon arrived, a lot of things started to fall into place and CAPE became a more established, serious organization. And so I think that's kind of where we end the startup phase, in my opinion. Again, if you disagree, send me some notes with citations. I'm hearing some laughs. Good to know I'm funny. That helps my morale a little bit. So here's major milestones again. So I want to start with CAPE campaigning against pesticides. We often refer, or we being some staff members, refer to the pesticides work and toxics, I guess, more generally as CAPE's like legacy piece. It's kind of this foundational thing. They're the first set of campaigns that CAPE worked on, and they were CAPE's campaigning primary focus for many, many years. So in 2002, CAPE launched a municipal pesticides project where they did things where they supported community groups with research, providing doctors to speak to, city councils and politicians and to the public. They met with decision makers. They did letter writing campaigns, public education, just like all of the above. And it was really successful. And this is kind of what we credit to CAPE becoming a figure in like the public's awareness. A lot of people heard about CAPE because of our pesticides campaigns. And this is from what, again, in my opinion, put us on the map. So here we have an ad from a campaign in London. We have our very own Gideon Foreman with our current Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow delivering, I think it said in the description of this photo, 10,000 petitions back when it wasn't just a couple of buttons to press on a computer or my phone. And a fun video that was advertised for several years that CAPE put out to be shown to communities and decision makers, et cetera. So that's just a little bit of the work that the organization did on this issue. And the impact was huge. Again, I know that I'm missing things here, but CAPE played a role in so many pesticide limitations or bans that were placed all over Canada. So in 99, there were, I can't tell you exactly which is which between bans and limitations off the top of my head, but again, if you email me, I can send you out of my notes. But there's Stratford, Ontario, Halifax, the entire province of British Columbia, Peterborough, Ontario, London, New Brunswick, all of Ontario, Newfoundland, Labrador, Manitoba, and Montreal, all placed at the very least restrictions on usually excessive or cosmetic pesticide use. In some places, complete bans. So I think it's really exciting and it's really important to show kind of how CAPE has worked both at the local level and how that work kind of expanded across Canada to create larger changes that have had real impacts. And then another milestone to me is taking up clean energy. So in 2010, you can see that little newsletter to the left is when CAPE announced that we were going to be expanding our campaigns formally to include clean energy and climate issues. So of course, CAPE community members have been working on climate and all sorts of issues outside of pesticides forevermore. Like people have been working on issues for so long individually, but this is when CAPE nationally as an organization took up the climate and clean energy campaigns. So in 2010, we announced it, and some big moments are the coal phase out in Ontario, which happened in 2013, which I recently learned from Dr. Joe Vipond and Ben Thibault, that this was the largest emissions reduction initiative in all of North America, and I think to this day stands as the single largest emissions reduction initiative in North America. In 2022, we also launched our Fossil Fuel Ads Make Us Sick campaign, which you heard about this morning, and I think we'll hear about a little bit more later, if I'm not wrong about the schedule. In 2023, we had Alberta announced their coal phase out. I should put 2024, though, as when it happened, because we did celebrate it with a webinar and a fun in-person event. Bill C-59 was also passed this year, strengthening rules against greenwashing, which had major waves. Again, you heard about that earlier, so I'm not going to go too deep. But these are just a couple of moments. Again, so many milestones, trying to pick out the best. Another major thing to me is, I'm saying getting amped as an homage to the fact that Kimia thought of the acronym AMP in part to use it this way, and I think it's a fun way to describe it. So in June of 2022, AMP launches the Advocacy and Mobilization Program in response to requests from the CAPE community to receive education and tools to be able to advocate for the environment further, looking because they wanted to address kind of the root causes of the health issues that they were seeing in their practices, on the news, all around them. So as of today, AMP has nearly 100 graduates with more than 30-ish more people to come because they're currently enrolled in cohort 3, which is going for a couple more months still. And I've heard only the most amazing things. I know several of you who are here today are AMP current participants or alumni, and it's been a real way to bring people into the organization and empower them to become leaders themselves and work on the issues that matter the most to them. And then I just want to finish with a little report, I guess, on what it's been like celebrating CAPE's 30th anniversary so far. So we've had several events and lots of things and more to come still. But here is what we've done so far. So, I wanted to talk about today CAPE has, which you saw again at the beginning, but I like this frame. We have 18 full-time staff, a couple of part-time too. We've got 10 regional committees, over 30,000 supporters. And so that's what we're celebrating this year, is the massive support and the huge growth that we've had over the last couple of years. We're really gaining momentum. And again, that's why it's important to celebrate. So a few events. We started off, we're going left to right here, started off with a very fun event in Ottawa when we had our staff retreat. We took the opportunity that we were all in person to have kind of like a meet and mingle. We had a bunch of CAPE supporters come out and several decision makers, which was cool. Also like little informal opportunities to get the message in. In June, we had a webinar that Warren was kind of the host and MC of, with several people who are here today as well. 10 whole speakers plus Warren, where we talked about CAPE history, and he did some incredible interviews with each person. I highly recommend that you go check it out. It is on our website, to be coming on the 30th anniversary page, currently under the webinar tab. In, I want to say, August, there was a small local film screening of the film Plastic People, which some of you might have heard about, the idea of hosting your own film screenings, which I think would be very cool. But this is the first one that we did by a CAPE supporter, again, in Nelson. She gathered some local professionals and her circle to come together, watch the film, and have a discussion and share a bunch of CAPE action items. We also had in Toronto, again, left to right. In Toronto, we kicked off AMP Cohort 3 with a fun celebration that included some donors, some new AMP participants, alumni, staff members. It was a really great time to invite new people in and show them the warm embrace that CAPE can offer. And then finally, we just recently had a celebration in honor of the Alberta coal phase out, the second largest emissions reduction initiative in North America. You can see that the mayor came and he spoke to us and gave us all, some kudos. And we had a webinar in the morning with several experts who were talking about, again, lessons learned from the Alberta coal phase out campaign and where the coal phase out work is going forward. That was too fast. But now, finishing it off nice and quick, I want to share the video teaser. Again, this is a shorter version of the larger video that is to come with even more interviews, bilingual, but we wanted to have something to showcase to you all to see how we're finding more ways to feature CAPE doctors' stories. So I'm going to play, if that's okay.
I was hearing increasingly, again, about evacuations on First Nations and being impacted by fire, being impacted by flood.
One night I was in the NICU and the air, we could just smell the smoke even inside the hospital, despite the filtration system in the hospital.
The World Health Organization states that climate change is the #1 threat to human health of the 21st century.
It feels like I'm putting a Band-Aid on this gaping wound and sending those people back out to live with it.
Physicians hold the highest level of public trust. Our voices really matter. When we push together, we can really make a difference. There are so many ways to get involved at CAPE. The very, very first is going to the website and clicking around and just getting an understanding of what we do and seeing if it resonates with you.
I hope you enjoyed, again, just a teaser of what's to come. And before I hand the reins back and close off my piece for today, I want to say thank you to everyone that's engaged in the anniversary so far, to the people who have shared your stories, who have sat with me for interviews, who have sent me files and information. This organization, again, happens with the incredible dedication of so many people who are finding time in their busy lives to work on the issues that matter to them and are trying to bring more people in and continue growing this movement. So thank you for your contributions. And I hope that more of you want to host an event or share your story. If you want to talk about how CAPE has impacted you, what you want CAPE to be for the future, where you want to go, please email me and send me your stories. I'm always looking for ways to highlight the incredible people that are part of this. So yeah, that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for listening to my bit and listening to my jokes and looking at my fun slides.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for that very cool look back at our time and some great comments in the chat saying thank you. The video gave chills, great video teaser. The plastic documentary, how's the plastic documentary gone? My understanding is it's maybe currently so it's not our documentary, but we were a partner, and it's actually currently being screened in South Korea at the Plastics conference. And we've been sort of involved in various ways. So it's very cool to see that impact, again, here and around the globe. Now let's look forward. So I'm going to do a very brief overview of our new strategic direction. In the next 15 minutes, I don't want us to be late for our wonderful keynote that's coming up, but I do want to share with you where we're going, and I'm really, really excited about this. Okay, here we go. CAPE is embarking on this new strategic direction, basically starting now. Why? 30 years of history. In the last 3 years, CAPE has grown significantly, which I think some of you who've been around for a while can see that. Gideon Foreman is currently sitting in my basement with the Toronto people, and it's a very different organization in some ways, I think, than when he started. Same spirit, but we have grown significantly. We have 19 staff, we have new campaigns and projects. We've had 4 leadership changes even in the past 4 years because our wonderful Anjali, who is also in the basement, had a couple of children. And so this organization has changed and grown. And as it's changed and grown, and as the landscape has changed and grown, we've seen a need to refresh what CAPE is doing, looking back at this 30-year history, and think about how we can most effectively deliver our message. Looking at the evidence, looking at what we've done in the past 30 years. So we started this thing called the Impact and Strategic Clarity Stream of Interweave, which is now Make Way Foundation, which was working, which gave us some funding to work with a coach to help us design this process. We started in October 2023. Through the process, we drafted, tested, and refined a set of outcome goals and a theory of change to validate and refine our thinking through research and analysis. In other words, we designed sort of a new approach, but based on evidence, based on interviews with our people, based on conversations with staff, based on conversations with board, about how do we most effectively deliver, how do we most effectively have an impact in the world? Here's what we learned. The key value added for CAPE is physicians as spokespeople and advocates. This came up over and over again in our interviews, in discussions with our funders. You as physicians are incredibly effective. And in fact, I had heard a statistic that in Canada, physicians are the second most trusted voice on climate change out of any other profession. So we know that physicians are generally well trusted. This is a piece that came up and is very important for us moving forward. We also understood that it was essential to increase the focus on justice. It is very clear to us and probably to you that we cannot really talk about environment and health without talking about justice. And Dr. Horner keynote will touch on this as well. But we have to make sure that this is a part of the analysis and this is a part of the conversation. Focus on narrative change. We are best positioned as a partner that uplifts and shapes others' bold policy proposals. We bring the most value added when our physicians are sitting at the Senate talking about a policy proposal and bringing the health and justice angle. Our physicians are best positioned when they're writing an op-ed on a policy that's come out. Our physicians are, us and our physicians are best positioned when we're giving the health lens on other organizations' strong policy proposals on environmental issues. And this is why we've decided this is an area we primarily want to focus on rather than creating our own policy. Okay. So I wanted to say this intended impact statement is not necessarily going to be public, but it does help drive us forward in the work that we're doing. So by 2029, physicians in so-called Canada will lead narrative change on both the connections between health, justice, and the environment and high impact policy proposals at various government levels. We'll achieve this through strategic and collaborative relationships and by mobilizing and supporting 50 deeply engaged CAPE physician messengers and 5,000 actively engaged physicians. So that is a bit to be defined, but the 50 deeply engaged are going to be our physicians, like some of our board members, Dr. Joe Vipon, Dr. Melissa Lam, Dr. Sam Green, who are really out in the media, are speaking at international events, are constantly pushing this message of health, justice, and environment. And 5,000 are some of our folks who have joined regional committees, who are signing petitions, who are writing letters. This is in the next 5 years. I'm not going to go through this too deeply on the theory of change because there's a lot here, but I'm happy to answer questions about it either here or in the future. We want to strategically partner with organizations that are well aligned with our goals, including justice-focused organizations, other healthcare providers, the Canadian Medical Association, these kinds of folks. And our physicians are kind of in the middle of this. They are partnering and then they are sending the word out through everything from media interviews to speaking at the House of Commons, whatever it is, to influence policymakers, going through traditional and social media, and speaking to other physicians in the CAPE community. Again, I know there's a lot of words on the screen, but essentially, we will train up physicians to understand the CAPE voice, the narrative and tactics, and why and how physician storytelling is important. We saw in that video the physician talking about how they witnessed wildfire smoke in the NICU. That story is very powerful. It's very real. It's happening. These stories will land a deep impact on the public, on policymakers, and on the world. And we want to make sure we can help as CAPE amplify those voices. this is a bit the sort of outcomes that we're aiming for. Again, this is quite detailed, but I'm happy to share more at another time. We have set ourselves some immediate goals, and then there's some longer term goals in the recognition that setting a direction and trying all of this out means that we're not necessarily going to do it all right away, right? We need to look at what we're doing now. We need to find ways that we bring this theory of change into the work that we're doing. So we've set some goals for the next 2 years around our work to help us move this forward. And I'll just say at this point that right now we have several staff committees that are working to implement different parts of this. Kimia, who is our director on the AMP program, is actually going to be shifting a little bit, still doing AMP, but also now focusing on how we do engagement and training of our physicians, and really how do we design this ladder of engagement, which for those who don't know is the idea of how physicians are coming into CAPE. When they come in, what are they doing? How do we help support them do more advocacy? How do we help make sure that they're trained to do that? So a lot of the work that we're already doing, that we have been doing, but amplified and raised up a little bit more. And then our intermediate outcomes are going to, by 2029, this is what we want to have achieved, that our physicians are trained up in the narrative and they understand how to talk about health, justice, and environment, that we have this very active community. Again, recognizing that this is already happening for CAPE in our regional committees, in our AMP program, many of our physicians who are working in other ways with us, but that we want to really track those numbers and create more. Just some director perspectives from our current president, Melissa Lem, about how the role that she's played, and Dr. Sam Green. And I want to say as well, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning, when we embarked on this process, it actually involved several people. Anjali Helferty, the executive director who's on leave, but who's in the Toronto room, myself, when I came in January, Jane MacArthur, Kimia Rezagian, and Sam Green, and Melissa Lem were all involved. So our board and staff were involved in doing this together. We are going to be doing a more official launch of this direction and sharing that more widely, but I did want to give everybody in our friends and family circle a taste of what's coming. I think it's really exciting. I am going to pass it over to just if anybody from the team, Jane, Kimia, Melissa, or Sam would like to speak to this just for a minute, anything else you'd like to share, I would invite that now.
I'll just say a few words. Kimia doesn't look like she wants to say anything right now. Maybe she will after. But I just want to say it was a very detailed process over several months, which Sabrina mentioned. And the interesting thing is, CAPE, so there's so many different organizations, people, whether it's government, other environmental organizations, who ask CAPE for our time. Like, we have way more demands on our time than we can handle. And so this is really a part of exactly what Sam said in her quote, is what she says in her quote is trying to figure out how we can manage all the requests that we have on our time and energy and resources and make the most impact. And it really brings us back to how CAPE was originally formed and what it did initially, which is interesting because now that it's our 30th anniversary, which is standing beside organizations that are really great at policy, and lending that health voice, lending the physician voice in particular, to get that policy over the hump and actually get it adopted and change social opinion. So anyway, I'm very excited as a person who really loves storytelling and dialoguing with decision makers and the general public also to see this be implemented through our organization.
I will add very briefly, as a part of that team who worked on this, which was a tremendous privilege and honor to be able to do so, and I learned so much. One of the things that I'm coming away with from that process is I'm excited at the level of staff, being a person on staff, to really have clarity on how do we as staff support the big base of physicians, the growing community of physicians, to really have the greatest impact. So how can we, as non-physicians who are tasked with various roles and campaigns and working with coalitions, how do we serve as a bridge in order to get the physicians out there? And so I just think it's really exciting. I think it's really helpful to us on staff to really know what our direction is, what our day-to-day realities are in this organization, and how can we, as I say, we use that superpower of the physician voice to shift policy. Thanks.
And I was just going to add, for those who weren't following along as this was happening, I think everyone would be happy to know that it was a hugely rigorous process, which involved a lot of checks to see whether we were going in the right direction, including like scientific literature reviews, interviews with our volunteers, staff, board members, funders, strategic partners, many different things. So I am very happy with where it landed.
To just add to the chorus of the working group, I'll share that at the end of the day, we spent so much time and so much research and so many human resources on this so that CAPE could do its work most effectively. At the end of the day, we wanted to do what we were doing, but fine tune it so that we actually can see the environment and the planet move to a healthier place and not just do a bunch of make work. You know, we heard Dr. David Suzuki talking about the failures of the environmental movement. We don't want to reproduce those things, and that's kind of the ultimate vision. So to mobilize our network effectively and also pull in other physicians who maybe haven't traditionally been in the planetary health space. We're going, you know, you see that desire to grow to thousands of actively engaged physicians. So reaching people we haven't reached yet. So excited to see how that grows over the next few years.
Thanks, everybody. And I see that Peo, Anjali's youngest and newest, has just joined us in Toronto. And she's in the basement of the Toronto room. Hi, Peo. We have like 2 minutes. If there's any quick chats, quick questions, please put in the chat and we'll try to answer them. But I will tell you that my metaphorical door is always open to this conversation. I would love to hear what you think. We will be in the new year putting forward a more comprehensive communication plan around how to get the word out about what we're doing. We have spoken to several of our funders. They're extremely enthusiastic about it, which is great for us. We love that, and our supporters as well. But if you have any questions at all, we can have a look at those right now, which I now seem to have lost the chat. So let me stop sharing.
Great. Is there time for just a quick comment?
Yeah,
Sabrina. So thanks. This is wonderful and exceedingly exciting. How much? I'm sorry, Gideon Foreman. I was the executive director from 2004 to 2015. This is wonderfully exciting how much you've grown. I'm delighted. Never could have foreseen this growth. It's brilliant. I do want to just flag that a lot of the discussion today has been about the program, which is wonderfully exciting. My 2 cents would be not to lose sight of the fundraising side as well. It's not glamorous, but crucially important. And there is a little bit of vulnerability that so much of our funding, I say our because I still have my heart in this organization, that the funding comes from big foundations, which is wonderful for the next few years. But I do want to urge you to continue to focus on building the individual donor base of individuals who are giving gifts, the monthly giving. Those are crucial pieces because that money will continue year after year after year when the foundation money dries up. So you're at a wonderfully strong position now, which is fantastic. I would use that to also build your foundation in terms of the fundraising. So I'll just leave it just my 2 cents there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gideon. And actually, it's a great point. I'll chat with you at the break about this, but we are working on bringing in, building up growing our major gift program. And Karina and I are in the process of setting up some phone calls with some of our major donors. So if you're in the room, you might hear from us before the end of the year to talk about this. And we did launch in the 30th anniversary a fairly audacious goal of raising $1 million in pledges and in $1 million over 3 years, I should say, in gifts in honor of the 30th anniversary. We're about a third of the way there. And we have 2 more years to go. And the idea of this major gift campaign was specifically to focus on individual donors to build out our base of individual support. Honestly, I could have a conversation all day, every day with people like the people who are in this room to talk to you about why I think this this plan is strong, and why it's so important to have people participate in a variety of ways in CAPE, not just taking an action, but being a donor, talking to their physicians. There's so many things. So I just want to read off a couple of notes from the chat, and then we're going to go into our next section. From Warren Bell, I feel as part of the development of CAPE, we members should consider developing a pledge program whereby membership involves a commitment to personal efforts to reduce our harms to planetary health. Things like using public transit where possible, making dietary choices that are planet friendly, avoiding the use of harmful chemicals, avoiding climate and planet unfriendly holidays. I think that could be in the cards. I will say that a lot of our focus at CAPE is advocacy and policy change, but certainly within the conversation, the narrative around climate and health and justice, there are pieces around individual action as well that are important. So thank you for sharing that. Minka Chan said, maybe we need to reach out to the provincial health organizations about communication to members and also to a health facility staff organizations. Thank you for that. Yes, and yes, that is part of the strategy, but we do have some work to do to build those relationships. We do have some of those. We want to build those in the coming years. Note from Vancouver, Hello CAPE Price Civics Challenge to meet urgent and fundamental change needed for our work. Current approaches aren't meeting the challenge. Yeah, I mean, I think that we could have a much longer and fulsome discussion about whether or not current efforts are meeting the challenges. Do we have a lot of work to do? Yes. I personally don't think, I don't take quite such a pessimistic view of change. I've been working on climate change for 15 years. I have seen a lot of things shift in a positive way. So I think it's both. I think we both are aware of the urgency of these challenges, but I would also say I'm not one to, disagree with David Suzuki, but I would say that, we have to be aware. I think it's important to focus on hope, and this is something that if we don't do that, then it's going to be hard to move forward. Feedback and thought, yes. So Melissa did answer that. Thank you. We did seek out a lot of feedback, and Kimi says you can bring all your engagement ideas to the engagement breakout session happening this afternoon. Love that. Thank you so much. Good idea. Okay, so speaking of environment, health, and justice, I'm so delighted to kick off our keynote speaker today, as well as another special guest, and I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. It is my delight to introduce Dr. Ojisto Horn, who is on our board of directors. Ojisto is a Mohawk Haudenosaunee woman whose mother is from Kanawake and father is from Akwesasne. She is Bear Clan, has many children, and is traditionally minded. Working as a family physician, she helps her people through all stages of the life cycle. She teaches medical students and residents the complexities of providing primary care to Indigenous peoples and their communities, drawing on both Western and traditional paradigms, working with like-minded Indigenous and non-Indigenous physicians across the country with a clear eye to the effects of the environment and pollution on our health. She promotes the inclusion and support of traditional knowledge and ways of being into a framework for providing holistic and primary care to her people. And I just want to say this session, we're going to talk about how environment, health, and justice is related to reconciliation with Indigenous people. Dr. Horn's going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then I will introduce the second guest for today, and we'll have a bit of a fireside chat. So Dr. Horn, please go ahead. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really very happy to talk today about something that is very current. And I actually haven't spoken too much about this in the past. So this is sort of new. I have been doing a lot of speaking. And this particular discussion has to do with the combination of two goals. At the end of this, I'm going to talk about the Indigenous caucus that CAPE has implemented and the rationale for it. And I want to give you one story to understand why it's so important to stop and listen to the stories of the people in our communities, because they are different from the stories that you're hearing in the rest of Canada. So I'm going to share my screen. So just give me one moment, please. Screen, let me see. Why is this not working? Share, there we go. Can you give me the option to share my screen? Is that there?
You can just give us 1 second.
Yeah, you're a co-host. You should be able to share.
I am? Okay, so why is it not working? I don't usually have this problem. Advanced. Video slides as background, sure. There. Nope, it's not working. So
Do you want to send it to me just so and I can share it for you?
This
Email
is
it?
very disappointing. Okay, so I don't know what to do.
Oh, just so do you want
and-
to email it to me and I can share it for you? Would that help?
Sure. I just don't understand. I don't usually have this problem about the inability to share my screen. I'm going to try one more time and then I'll just talk and I'll share it to you. Right, I'm disappointed right now. That's great. There it is. The button now worked, I think. Could it be in pri I do this all the time, and this does not necessarily happen. I don't think my privacy settings would have changed in the past few days, and I don't know. Okay, so I'm just going to just start. I'm quite disappointed. I had some. So I'll look at my picture and I'll tell you what I'm seeing. Okay, in my slides. Okay.
Can you email it to Sabrina? I think that's what she said. Email, maybe you can.
I'm actually now very flustered and I am having a hard time. I should have just, okay, so let me do this.
Okay.
Let me send this.
It's okay. We're patient. We're good.
Okay.
We're just sending a big hug. You're awesome.
Okay. Okay, so this would be 2024, November 23rd, CAPE. CAPE. Okay, now I gotta go into here.
Maybe answer.
I don't think anyone's sharing.
I don't know what is happening, and because I'm flustered right now, I actually can't work on my computer, so I'm not quite sure what to do. Just let me just.
Yeah, take your time. It's so it's all good. We can if we can support you, you let us know. Otherwise, we're happy to give it a few minutes.
Okay, so
Sure. Yeah. We're gonna, Kimia wants to share a bit more about the
no
theory.
problem. Go right ahead, please.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can, so that we're not all sitting here in silence, we can speak a bit more about the theory of change. So yeah, another thing that I don't think we spoke to as much is kind of the affirmation of environmental justice as central to CAPE's work. And of course, over CAPE's history over the last 30 years, environmental justice, working in solidarity with Indigenous communities on the ground has been important, but to make sure that that's an affirmation and integrated in all of our campaigns and all of our work going forward, that's really both growing the mobilization base at CAPE and also the
Sorry, I can't talk right now.
Justice. Awesome.
I can't get into.
Oh, what was that, Ojisto? Oh, okay, she's just working on that. Yeah, so I just wanted to name that's also something we really underlined in the theory of change work.
I sent it to Sabrina. Did you get it, Sabrina?
I did. Let me
Okay,
open
could you
it and
please-
share it
could
right
you
now,
please?
and we are good.
Oh my gosh.
You know what?
Thank you.
I will just say, it was just so we saw it earlier, but like this is the nature sometimes I feel of this kind of thing, and sometimes things just don't work. And hold on, click to download. Okay. Oh my goodness, it's in an iCloud. Okay, give me 1 second.
And it's totally okay. It's like we're all friends here, you know? Just it's like we're all friends
This is a
here.
back-end Zoom.
Yeah, this
It's
is like
not-
it's not public facing. Like it's
Sorry
just
about
imagine you're in a room with your buddies. That's basically what's happening. So don't worry, Ojisto, you're awesome. I miss you, by the way.
Oh,
We
yay,
spent a
me
week
too.
together in Colombia, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to learn more from you soon.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we're
Mark.
almost there. I'm just gonna upload it to my thing.
Can I say, is it okay if I say something
Please do.
on our previous, while we're kind of doing the tech stuff? So we heard very powerful words from David Suzuki, and there was a couple of kind of comments in the chat about, well, how is CAPE responding to this existential crisis that we're in? And I just wanted to say that actually, I think I believe that the theory of change does, in that it's actually trying to, by shifting the narrative, it's shifting like the fundamental narrative shift, like opens up for more a fundamental shift in values, in worldviews, in how people see and understand their world. And I think that this is the work that's needed, that needs to happen for the kind of fundamental change. And CAPE is extremely powerful, and physicians are, have an extremely powerful voice, and we're only just part of that. This is something that's beyond what we can do alone, and so our commitment is to do the work that we need to do, and the greater planetary shift is in a way then out of our hands and beyond. We're just contributing what we can. So I just wanted to say that in response to this kind of this crisis. So thank you.
Thanks, Rakia. Yeah, and lots of good discussion in the chat. But I wanted to say that here's a nice example of how CAPE can support our incredible physicians and the important work that they're doing. I have got the slideshow to work, so just so hopefully you can see it. But you can just tell me to hit next, and I'm happy to. I'll move it for you, and I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you for your patience. I'm pretty good at Zoom now, but that was a surprise, so I'm not quite sure what happened. So please, I'm here to talk about this intersection of our stories and health and the environment. And I do think that it's very important to hear these stories in depth, because they are so complicated, and there are very few people who have the patience and the expertise and the interest to be able to listen to these stories and then advocate. And we can't advocate correctly or efficiently unless we incorporate this into our strategy. So next slide, please. So I'm going to, in light of Bill S5, the right to live in a healthy environment, and Bill C226, development of a strategy to address environmental racism and injustice, I want to describe where I'd like to know, where can we collect these community stories to inform Bill C226? We have to have a place to inform the strategy so that it can include our voices. And I'd like to do that by describing briefly the story of Akwesasne in 4 parts: pre-industrial, industrial, the sequelae, and new concerns regarding environment and the health and the community. And then, of course, this would underlie the rationale for CAPE making the Indigenous caucus. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about Akwesasne. This is where my father is from. This is where I now work. I've been a family doctor. Now I'm in my 17th year. I previously worked in Kahnawake, and now I'm in Akwesasne. Akwesasne, we've been here for a very long time. We are now, in this peculiar position where the 45th parallel goes right through our community. And so, of course, the American-Canadian border bisects our community. And on the Canadian side, we have the Ontario and Quebec border. So we have actually 3 different jurisdictions, which includes 3 provincial and state jurisdictions, as well as 2 federal jurisdictions, as well as the Northern Indian Affairs Band Council system, and on the southern side, the Bureau of Indian Affairs federal system. So we have all sorts of jurisdictions that are complicating how we look at what we're talking about today. And if we can figure out how to advocate for here and understand this story, then we will be able to recognize and understand the stories that are happening across Canada. Next slide, please. Okay, so Akwesasne is this beautiful area. We just upstream from us on our territory, there was these huge sets of rapids. It drops 80 feet. There's huge number of islands, the 1,000 islands, lots of biodiversity, very deep waters and shallow waters and fast and slow moving. So lots and lots of fish. We've got lots of wetlands. This was an area, if you look at the map of North America, where big game could swim easily across the St. Lawrence River, the Ganyat-Darawanano, which is the St. Lawrence River, the Great River. So this was a very special place for the traffic of human and non-human animals, as well as the plant species that were here. And so we, having been here for, since time immemorial, we actually could sustain ourselves quite efficiently. And our men also went off to work in the big cities in the American bridges and skyscraper projects over the past 70 years. And so we were really very, very self-sustaining. Next slide, please. However, to be able to capture the kinetic and potential energy of this huge Ganyat-Darawanano fall rapids, they made the Moses Saunders Power Dam in the 1950s. And what this did was it attracted 6 huge factories that basically encircled our community, most of them being downriver and downwind from these factories. And so within 5 years of one particular or 2 particular industries, we noticed some very big changes happening with with the health of our animals and things like honeybees. And so we asked for, a veterinary to come and look at our animals. We had a huge dairy industry, and we noticed that the animals were having stillbirths. They were losing their teeth. They were losing muscle mass, and they weren't able to gain weight and have offspring. And it was very, very disturbing because we were taking such good care of them. And now all of a sudden we weren't able to. We were gaslit, and it took 17 years after being told over and over, you guys don't know how to take care of your animals. You're doing something wrong. Finally, we had an independent observer come in from Cornell University and was here for 2 hours and said, you have severe fluorosis here. And that began this whole investigation into the pollution around our community. And so since then, we've had a whole bunch of research. We've had a lot of advisories as how we are to interact with the earth and the water. And now for the most part, we are not able to safely interact with our environment. Next slide. And so as I mentioned, lots and lots of different types of research were done. And this is a good map describing some of the research that was done. And they basically found that we have an incredible amount of PCBs, lead, mercury, dioxins, aluminum, fluorine. And they found the relationship of these chemicals were related to detrimental effects like cancers, autoimmune disease, endocrine disorders, neurological effects, such as cognitive and mental health dysfunction and disequilibrium. Next slide, please. And so since we have had a complete change in our relationship to the land, we have lost a big part of the transmission of our culture and our language. And we have been forced to accept other economic ventures. There has been this huge cleanup, but it has been extensive, but very incomplete. And since this huge amount of research that happened in the 90s, the research has pretty much stopped, and we have not been doing prospective data collection. And even though in the community there's this general acknowledgement that there are elevated rates of cancer and diabetes and other health conditions, this is only anecdotal because we don't have the data, and our EMR has not been designed to capture any of this data. one of the important things that these children who played in this soup of unregulated pollution are now in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and they are presenting with really, really ill health and very complicated internal medicine type presentations in my family medicine, general medicine clinic. Next slide, please. So we know that the chronic exposure to industrial man-made carcinogenic, neurotoxic, endocrine disrupting PCB molecules that we find in our surrounding water and soils has really resulted in some problems anecdotally. And like I said, we are not measuring the exposures, and there have been no repercussions for companies to exceed their maximum threshold of pollution as set by their own standards by the US Environmental Protection Act. And it's very important to understand that because our community is right on the border, we actually, as an Indigenous community on the northern side, we are asking the southern side and the American system to hold their companies accountable to their pollution. So we're talking about international strengthening of environmental protections. The research also regarding PCBs in the general research community stopped about 15 years ago. New slide. Now, this is the thing that's really concerning to me and what I wanted to bring to your attention today. So as we know, parent PCB molecules were sold in groups of different PCB congeners or types, and they each had their own separate their qualities. Like some could be more viscous and some more solid, some more liquid, and they were called Aerochlor mixtures. And so these were sold by Monsanto, and unfortunately, that's what they are measuring in the environment. And so over time, it's Aerochlor that's being measured. They're not measuring the congeners that are related, that are not part of the original parent molecule. The reason that's very concerning is because these parent molecules are actually found to degrade naturally in the environment through natural biological processes by the anaerobic bacteria. It just so turns out that if you have certain bacteria, they will degrade faster in some areas. And it turns out that we have this problem here in our community. The other concern is because you're not measuring, you don't know what the congeners are, but it also, we are making the assumption that a breakdown product is going to be actually better. And I'd like to say that I'm very unhappy to find out that the breakdown product of PCBs into PCB4, which is a breakdown product, an end product, is actually far different than its parent molecule. Next slide. So as I said, they naturally degrade in the environment. PCB4 is a very simple molecule. It's got two phenyl rings with two chlorines. And they found that these two chlorine rings, if they're at the ortho positions, they are actually found to be more carcinogenic. Now, what's concerning is these molecules are easily aerosolized because they're so light. And there was a tree bark study that was done in 2019 that was done independent of everything else by the community. And they looked at 56 trees around the community, and they tested the bark on trees ages 2 to 200 years old. And they found in all of the trees the presence of this PCB4 molecule. What's concerning is that that's not a parent molecule, and this is a chronic exposure, and it's been going on. And now we are particularly concerned because we don't know much about PCB4. It's not routinely measured, and there's very little research as to what this molecule actually does. However, we know that PCBs degrade faster in heat. They are easily aerosolized. We breathe them in the lungs. They get into our system. They're carried by prealbumin, and they pass the blood-brain barrier. And so I'm very concerned about what this effect is going to be, in 5, 10, 15 years on our general health, in particular because there's very little information at this time. New slide. So What is also concerning, in an effort to curb the greenhouse gases, the carbon-free hydroelectricity that is generated by the Moses Saunders Power Dam, which is just upriver of us on our land, is attracting new industry to the area. And they are using existing infrastructure of the previous factories. And don't forget, these previous factories have been incompletely cleaned of their pollution. And there are two industries that are of current importance. One is the Air Products hydrogen fuel plant, and then the other is the cryptocurrency plant. So PCB degradation, like I said, increases with heat and it's dispersed easily because it is aerosolized. So anything that increases heat or mechanical forces that can move this molecule through the wind and the water. Next slide, please. So let's start with the air. Cryptocurrency computer servers in the area, they've been put on the previous Alcoa site, and we can see from space there's quite a big heat signature. And so in trying to make these incredible calculations, huge algorithms, the servers get very, very hot. So there's like this heat dome over this in this space that has been incompletely cleaned for its PCBs in particular. And so because of that heat, you're going to increase the degradation of the parent molecule. And because it's so hot, they have to, so that the servers can be cooled down, what they do is they have these huge fans that are pushing the air so that the heat can be dispersed. But 85% of the prevailing winds go over into our community, but also with the mechanical movement of the air with this aerosolized PCB molecules is now going into our air. This has been going on for 5 years. And just last month, this company was given permission to dramatically tenfold increase in the size of their operation with no discussion about its effects on the underlying PCB pollution. So like I said before, we're not really sure what the pathophysiology of these daughter PCB molecules are, but I know that they are being stored in our fatty tissues, like our myelin and our breast tissues and in our brains. We know that they are inhibitors and promoters. They are carcinogenic. And so I have many, many concerns. And one of them is that we have to change the lungs cancer screening guidelines to include environmental exposures. Next slide. So we also know that that if you have lighter PCB molecules, they are coming out of the sediment at the bottom of canals, and they can be dispersed through the water. They are polar molecules. They're attached to sediments, and we have all sorts of underwater sediments in this area. And so they move from areas of stagnation and sediment into flows. In particular, we're concerned about this because of Air Products. This is a hydrogen fuel factory, and what they're going to do is make hydrogen fuel. And as part of this process, they're going to have heated water, 600,000 gallons a day, being poured into this man-made canal, which has several feet of PCB polluted sediment. And we're very concerned because this is going to mobilize just mechanically, as well as increase the degradation of the PCB molecule. And it's going to go by means through breaks in the dams on either side of this canal, as well as the underwater flows into our river system where we get our water. So my concern is we're treating our water. Are we actually assessing it for PCBs? Because some of them do not need to be attached to sediments. Many do. And so my question now, how do you even assess this? So I'm very concerned because our community has been drinking this water for the last 20 years. We did a Freedom of Information Act, and it took about 8 months for them to get back to us. And they said, oh no, we're not concerned. The heated water runoff will not disturb the canal's sediment. I don't know how much I trust that. So I really have a lot of concerns about these two factories right now, which are setting up shop and right adjacent to our community. Next slide. So like I said, the data is not being collected. We have anecdotal rates of illness. I don't understand why there is not much advocacy happening in our community. There are many reasons that I could talk about. but there's no collaboration between the north and the south side or the different departments on both communities. I'm talking about our Akwesasne that is divided by the north and the south side. We absolutely need to make a multidisciplinary plan to address changing exposures, particularly the aerosolized PCBs on our pregnant women and the neurological development of their babies intrautero, infants, children. Its effects on things like breast cancer, which are known to store PCB. And we need also, I'd like to know what the implications are to rapid weight loss. When you are redistributing some stored molecule in your fat and suddenly you're on Ozempic and you lose all this weight, are we actually excreting it in our body, or is it going to be dispersed somewhere else, like in the myelin or in the brains? And the concerning what I'm saying is that with all this weight loss, are we going to have increased problems with liver disease, as well as dementia, as well as problems with nephropathy in the next while? Next slide, please. So we're still eating the fish. We're still drinking and playing in the water. The water's not tested for all of the congeners, specifically the ones that are changing, and the drinking water is not being cleaned. Next slide, please. You know, we always look at risk factors, and as we've said before, risk factors, we talk about genetics and epigenetics. We don't really talk about vertical transmission of different loads. We don't talk about the environmental exposures, including adverse childhood events. We know that this is altering our neuroimmune endocrine axis as well as our mental health. And I'm very concerned about, you know, I don't know, are so many of our young people who are vaping and using these very strong the cannabis, are they increased because of their underlying PCB exposure? Is that why we're seeing increased psychosis? I don't know. Plus, our men who don't have a lot of education have to do blue collar work, and they have increased occupational exposures. And so this is another interacting effect. We're also not screening because we don't fit the screening criteria because we have these other risk factors that have not been identified. But we seem to only concentrate on behaviors, diet, and activity, which I think is a huge problem that we have in our medical and public health system. Next slide, please. So these are the things that we're doing in the community in Akwesasne. Actually, me and a few people, we still need to figure out all of the different components. I have been reaching out all over the place to try and create a strategy, and that's going to include the north and the south side, as well as our leadership. Unfortunately, I'm finding out that not everybody has the capacity, the interest, or the ability to actually hear what we're talking about and our concerns. Next slide, please. And so now we're talking about, you know, going back to the land, trying to create land-based healing and traditional medicine. But what do we do in places where the land is actually not healthy? How do we do harm reduction? How do we try and reinvigorate our culture and our language, which is very much having to do with our relationship with the land and the water? These are really, really big questions, and I'm really, really concerned about the next coming generations. We are all, we have a lot of women who are interested in, doula and midwives and, traditional medicine, and we need to know how to do this in a really healthy way, and that requires a huge strategy from a whole lot of people with benevolence and using their mind to come up with a plan. I'm using this, what happened in our community, as an example, because the little intricacies and the concerns of me as a doctor that is not being talked about anywhere else is the same kind of thing that happened with Dr. O'Connor up in Alberta. And it's happening across the board, across Canada, in all these different communities. I'd like to finish by saying that when I was at doing the Senate testimony in Ottawa back in April for Bill C-226, the gentleman in front of me was from an Indigenous community in northern Manitoba. And afterwards, we talked to him, and he asked, like, where are you from? Like, what's CAPE? So I described what CAPE was. And he said, how do I join CAPE? How can I, because he had been very frustrated by nobody listening, nobody having the capacity to hear him. And so he was, up at band meetings, and he'd go and nobody could listen to him, and they'd like basically gaslight him. And he needed a place where people could actually hear his concerns and figure out how to help him advocate for the health of his people. And so that's one of the reasons why we have made the Indigenous Caucus. It's for those regional, these community specific, I call them busybodies, because they are very, very concerned about their people, and they have become independent learners, and they are trying to find advocacy in people who can hear and can advocate with a strong voice. And that is why CAPE's Indigenous Caucus was formed. I'm very happy for the support that CAPE has provided this type of story, and I really look forward to seeing you guys in the future at our Indigenous Caucus. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Horn, for a powerful and challenging and important presentation. And I know it's something very personal to you, but should be on the radar of all of us moving forward. I want to introduce now Maria Shallard, who is joining us today from the Canadian Climate Institute. So Maria is the Director of Indigenous Research at the Canadian Climate Institute and is a Penelakut and European descent. She was raised in Lillooet Territory in Pemberton, Mount Currie, BC, and currently resides on unceded Comox Territory in Cumberland, BC. She has over a decade of professional experience as an educator, project manager, researcher, and has coordinated programs centered in supporting Indigenous health, education, youth, and climate change policy. She specializes in leading institutional and relational systems change that support reconciliation, justice, and equity from a place of well-being with the land, waters, and with one another. Her range of past work includes leadership positions at the BC Public Service, the University of Victoria, the University of Guelph, and advocacy roles with Indigenous organizations. Maria, welcome. And I'm so happy to have you here. So I'm going to hand it over to you in a moment to sort of kick off this fireside discussion, and I can also participate if you like. But I'd love, Maria, to first hear from you a little bit of how that Ojisto's presentation resonated with you, and maybe a little bit in the context of the work that you do.
Yeah, Aishkoil Nyalan Ojisto, that was a really powerful presentation, and I felt myself moved by a lot of what you shared and resonated with the cross-country examples of how this is happening in many communities. In particular, what jumped to mind, I immediately go to, okay, what actions can be taken? And at the Canadian Climate Institute, we partner with the Centre of Environment and Indigenous Resources on an Indigenous Perspectives program, where we amplify Indigenous-led research, particular case studies led by authors. And there's a roundtable at the end where we invite important policy decision makers to listen, witness, and we send out a survey after asking people how they'll actually be accountable to what they've heard, to stories like what you've just shared. And it's a funding opportunity, and I was thinking of that and just wanted to share it because I saw in the strategy presentation that I joined earlier that there's also a focus of how can we partner with other organizations and in particular policy. And I think there's an opportunity here to cross-pollinate and do some really powerful work. But I just really want to thank you for that story and feel really honored to be in this room and to see some familiar faces. Kimia is in Vancouver now, I see. So it's really great. I used to work with Kimia.
Wonderful, thank you. So Ojista, I'll pass it over to you and Maria to have a discussion about this topic. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll pass it over.
Hi. So so I am very I'm happy that there's a lot of it resonates. It's very, very important to recognize that there are people very, very, I call them the busybodies because they really know everything. Every community has them. I'm hooked up with the resident busybody and our whole team here. But those people don't necessarily have any purchase with the leadership of the community. There's a disconnect. And that's one of the biggest problems because there are so many, there's so much poverty and economic need in our communities that the leadership, unfortunately, has to make decisions that are actually kind of against the way that they would have made had they not been in so much need because of their poverty. And so we're seeing this across the board. And I was just, when Dr. David Suzuki in our previous, the little meet and greet at the beginning of this, he said, we stole this land. We're not going to go back to where we came from in the world, basically. We can't empty out the cities, but we could pay rent. And he was absolutely right. We could pay rent and then we would not have to make decisions where we are finding ourselves agreeing to things that are against the environment. We have a right to make those choices, but free, prior, and informed consent, like UNDRIP, means that we are not being unnecessarily cajoled to make a decision like poverty. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm not sure what else to add there. I can speak from my own personal experience in terms of poverty, and it does relate to climate change. Intergenerational trauma runs deep in my own family. My grandfather grew up in and out of orphanages, so did his great-grandfather and grandmother because she was part Penelakut First Nation and was considered quote unquote a half-breed, and people were treated really poorly. I think most people in this room know that history. But we grew up in and out of rental houses, doing what we could to sustain ourselves growing up. And when I was younger, we had a flood in our community just outside Mount Currie in 2003. And I remember talking to my mom saying, "Oh, look, the moon's shining on the field, and it's glittering." And she goes, "Maria, that's the river." And we saw a log flow by. And my mom had just recently been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it got me reflecting on, the impacts of how to respond in emergency, especially in climate emergencies such as floods, and especially for those most vulnerable. And I think we see that a lot in our communities because we've been placed through the reserve system, especially in vulnerable environments, in summer grounds that weren't meant to be lived in the winter that are prone to flooding continually. And I see that across the country, where the impacts of climate change are really prevalent.
Yeah, part of the reason the impacts of climate change are so relevant, it's not just that we are in those spaces. It's not just because the infrastructure has been designed to be so, vulnerable and weak. It's also because we're actually not part of the emergency response plans of any of the provinces or municipalities. We actually have to make those plans on our own. And that's so you've got you've got your 12, counselors, band counselors who are elected every 3 to 4 years. And they have this massive mandate to provide so many things. And it's the same people making all these decisions about the economy, about, holding, environmental regulations and collecting permits and all this stuff, and education and health, and roads and infrastructure and communications, and emergency services, holy moly. And we're not integrated unless we make a concerted plan to become integrated with the surrounding municipalities and provinces. And so that's why, and at the end of the day, a lot of people are, we open up, emergency places to go, and you hear about this on the radio and stuff, and why are they so not ready? And we don't have a lot of wealthy family members who live in the cities who could take us up and all that stuff. There's so many reasons we are vulnerable, not just our infrastructure, not just the poverty, not just because the emergency planning is not at the same level as and not as resourced as what's happening available for regular Canadians, but also those are the reasons. I'll stop there.
Yeah. We have a partnership with Indigenous Clean Energy right now. It's a network of individuals that work on the ground in their communities on clean energy projects from coast to coast to coast. And we're looking at Indigenous housing and the intersections with health and how proactively investing in healthier, safe, affordable houses can offset health costs, because we know that, mold risk is high, that asthma risk is high, that people are living in close quarters, and transmission of illness is more severe. And we had a gathering recently because we really want to improve the policies that impact healthier houses that are climate resilient. And you're talking about emergency response. What comes to mind with me is we had a case study working with Chief Patrick Mitchell from the wildfires that happened in Lytton a couple of years ago. And one of the things that he shared was that bananas were sent right after, and it's cooking hot. It's 40 degrees and they're sitting in the back of a truck. And people are asked to file claims, after your house is burnt down. And, how do you do that when you have no technology and you've lost everything? So these systems are all very integrated, emergency response, housing, health, and we need to be working together on the solutions to implement healthier houses for Indigenous communities.
Yeah, and it's important that I don't think people realize that we can't get mortgages to build a new house, and we can't get house insurance in community unless your community has somehow created a relationship with a local bank. There's a lot of problems with just infrastructure. It's just the way that Canada has been set up, which puts us all the time at an inequity. There's a question here by Warren about hereditary chiefs and the role of women. So I'd like to just I am Haudenosaunee. We don't have hereditary chiefs where I come from, but I will describe what is an important ethic for our people. We have something called the Women's Nomination Belt, which I wish I had with me. It's downstairs. And this is a wampum belt. And this wampum belt has one little figure in the middle, and then three sets of women on either side of him. And that little figure in the middle is the chief. And what that means is that chief, the two women beside him are his bear and his wolf and turtle clan mothers. And they would have seen all the boys and girls raised from little children all the way up through their adolescence and adulthood. And they would have known which ones had become great hunters and orators and would be able to be good chiefs that could best advocate for the needs of the people. And so in the values, using the values of the people. So the women would nominate that chief, and then beside them, the women who are of the other Mohawk communities would then ratify that nomination. And then the women, the clan mothers of the Confederacy, would then nominate that chief. So in the end, that chief was nominated by all the women clan mothers from the Confederacy. The important thing is not just the women who knew these children as they were raised, but those children were vetted, and they were part of a process where they were actually really known. So the other part is we have another wampum belt, and it's called the Ever-Growing Tree of Peace. And in there, it represents the Tree of Peace, which we knocked down and put all our implements of war and the reasons we would go to war, which is why you hear the word burying the hatchet. And then we put the tree back up, and there were roots that went in all four directions. And if you wanted to go get shelter under the Tree of Peace, you could follow those roots all the way to the center and get support from the Confederacy under the Tree of Peace. Now, when you walked to the tree and you wanted support, you had to accept to go by the peace, which is the Gayanet Goa. And there are whole ways of doing that. And you could participate in our longhouse and our ceremonies, and you could have discussions, but you could never hold a place of leadership. You would have been wearing your name hung around your neck, and that means that you could participate, but you can never be a leader. That leadership could only go to your grandchild, meaning that grandchild would have been vetted from when they were very young to the time when they were actually nominated to be a chief. So that whole idea of having a role of chieftainship comes from being vetted from when you were little. And if you are coming back to your home following the roots, you recognize that you have a place there, but you can never hold a place of leadership. And so these are some two very important ethics that kind of permeate across, Turtle Island. And unfortunately, the leadership we have now is not that way. It is an elected band council system. And so we have people who think one way, and we have an imposed electoral governance system that is from the Canadian government, and they are at odds. And this is the root of why we have so much problems in our community. Are you internally validated or externally validated? And so we have a lot of problems because our ways of knowing and being and governing of ourselves have been completely gaslit and removed and not acknowledged. So when we talk about hereditary systems and we talk about these kind of things, I'm giving you this example to understand how it would have worked a long time ago and why there are so many problems today.
Are there any other questions in the chat? Folks?
I don't see any right now, but I did have an interesting, somebody flipped me an interesting question around the idea of speaking about commercial determinants of health. And these are from the private sector activities that affect people's health directly or indirectly, positively or negatively. I wonder if either of you wants to talk about these commercial determinants of health, how they relate to climate and environment and Indigenous communities.
Did you say?
Yeah, I'll let you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I interrupted. Okay, so the commercial determinants of health is basically the capitalist system that we live in. And that capitalist system is based on a hierarchical structure. It's based on, the rights of some people being more stronger than the rights of other people. Certainly the rights of men more than women, and people more than, children, and more than the rights of animals and domestic over real, like there's this wild animals and plants, like there's this hierarchy that exists. And that is reflected in all of the way that the laws that have been put into place to protect that system. And so the capitalist system is protected by a whole judiciary system and all these institutions that have been created to support that those legal parameters, which reflect the inherent rights of this hierarchical, patriarchal system. And that's what we keep fighting about. And, when we talk about externalities are those things that are at the bottom of that list that completely get ignored when you're doing your environmental assessment or you're doing your economic forecasts. So things like Indigenous interests, the biodiversity, the future and the environment are not part of that, because you can't commodify that as easily as you can shareholders and their outcomes. And so we're trying to create a commercial or capitalist framework to fix the environmental crisis. But the environmental problems are actually as a result of capitalism. So when Dr. Suzuki talks about, we have to change the way we think, we have to imagine a new way of governing ourselves. And that may not include capitalism. How are we going to do that? We don't have a lot of time to do that. And so right now, the capitalist frameworks are totally ridiculous. You could actually, a company can, buy a whale or a rhinoceros, and they tag that rhinoceros or that whale because they have all this carbon that's stored in their bodies. When that animal dies, that company collects it and they can use it to exchange carbon credits. So what happens if you have an Indigenous people who go and they use that animal for their own needs, for their blubber, for their meat or whatever? They're actually can be sued because they took away that money that capitalist, that corporation would have otherwise gotten because of the cap and trade. So that's a capitalist framework that's being put onto a natural system, and so Indigenous people are very much at that intersection, and it's not going to work because it's only being directed by a capitalist model. Those are the commercial determinants of health, and we have to figure out how to think differently. I'll stop there. Sorry.
No, I think that's great. You know, it reminds me a lot of how well-being is so central within our communities because it's focused on kinship and relationship. And those relationships have been severed through the commodification of land, of water, in just what you're speaking about in that system. And so revitalization of our own governance systems, I think, is so valuable in this conversation. And there are well-being frameworks that are being used in other places, well-being ambassadors. I'd love to see more movement towards that within our own country. It's got me thinking, you know, when I made my first drum, we have to gift it, give our first drum away. And I was working with an elder and I said, you know, I don't have a strong connection to my community. My community had been moved to Salt Spring, Chuan. It's called Chuan. And he said, you know, there's always songs to sing. Look out at the tree line. And he asked me to sing to the notes of the trees. And I did that. I was really nervous. But he said, when those trees are cut down, you know, the home to the two-leggeds, to the birds that are in those trees, the oxygen, it's all removed, and so are our stories. And so it brought to me that, you know, that real connection that we have with the land and how important it is. And the land holds those memories. So I think the more that people go back to that, reconnect with yourself and reflect on, I think, you know, everyone comes from somewhere, and reflecting back to your origin story of your ancestors is so important too, in terms of the treaty history here, and treaties that haven't been settled. You know, I mentioned unceded territory, and that means that land has never been surrendered. And so I think that's very important to reflect on.
I think we're talking also about the who stewards the land and how do we take care of it. There is an implicit obligation just by being human that we are here to steward the spaces so that all parts of creation can carry out their original instructions as they came with, because they all have a right to carry out those instructions in a balanced way. So here we are, and we have forgotten that as humans, and we have made ourselves much more important than all of other life on Earth. And of course, as a result, we have this huge disequilibrium. But we have to go back to the idea of taking the honorable harvest, not taking more than we need, not hoarding, not stopping other people from getting the things that they need to survive, like food and water and shelter and foraging and traveling through, and being able to acknowledge that we all need these things, and this honorable heart. Oh yes, and don't take the first, don't take the second, don't take the fourth one, because by taking the fourth one, you're ensuring that there's always going to be something left for the future. Like all these ideas that are very old and they're still relevant, and these can also be incorporated into the ways of thinking. And we could start with our children, and in a generation we will see changes. But this takes an incredible amount of effort from everybody to recognize how important changing the way we think is vital to the existence of humans.
Yeah, definitely. Just remembering that we're animals as well.
We have a couple of questions in the chat, but also one in the Toronto room. So we're going to go to Toronto first. Please go ahead.
Hi, Ojisto and Maria. Hi, Ojisto.
Hi.
It's nice to see you. This is Anjali, the on leave director of CAPE. Your cap and trade example in particular really spoke to me in connection to how the environmental movement has interacted with Indigenous communities, with Indigenous rights over many decades, mostly, I would say, not extremely well. I'm thinking about the way that CAPE operates and the way CAPE does advocacy, and perhaps the internet room, the virtual room of people here who are campaigners and advocates and have heard now a powerful story from you. And if I'm thinking, Vancouver, you're having trouble hearing me? I'll try to be louder. I'll move the mic closer. So that the mechanism and the sort of way to ensure that our work at CAPE, and we thought about this in the strategic planning and the strategic impact and clarity project, is true to our values here and in alignment with what you're speaking about today. So, I can think about, okay, if we're advocating for a policy, anything CAPE agrees to must be in alignment with free, prior, and informed consent. Like, are there some things that we can talk about that aren't perhaps, all of CAPE suddenly gets in the weeds in Akwesasne, which is maybe not actually perhaps helpful or what you need, or perhaps it is, and you can let us know, but that there's a framework that we can be pushing forward across CAPE's work, that would be meaningful in terms of the impacts in your community and also elsewhere in the country.
So that's an excellent question, because I've been often wondering, well, what can be done? But the most important thing is to hear one story so that you can recognize parts of these stories across the board. And that's why the problem is a lot of people don't have, like I said before, the political, the patience, or the expertise to be able to actually hear. And so this gentleman who's been working for decades up in northern Manitoba has not been able to get anyone to capture what he wants to say. He's not getting capture from his own people, from the community leadership, from Manitoba Hydro. And so he's just like trying to find somebody who can stand beside him and help him. And so this is happening everywhere. And that's why the Indigenous Caucus is so important, because right now it's just a platform. But if people can come and bring their stories, then we can create a strategy to be able to look at this. But we don't have all that information yet. We're still in the truth phase. When we talk about truth and reconciliation, we're still trying to figure out what the truth is. And that's okay. We have to find all that information. And that's what the caucus is about. And then we can inform the strategy that's Bill C-226, and then and different parts of that strategy that will help these individual communities. So right now, I can't answer that, but if we can start trying to, if we can, support the works of the information getting to the Indigenous Caucus, that would be a massive start.
And yeah, that's a great question. We have we're going to take a 2 or 3 more minutes on this session, just because we started a bit late and this is such a fulsome and important conversation. This is a question from Tanette, who is one of our staff people. But Maria, I'd love to hear from you on this. And then just if you'd like to add, do you have concerns about the capitalist approach to transitioning to green energy? And maybe you can talk a little bit more about what that transition to green energy has looked like from an Indigenous perspective.
I don't know if I can speak to that so much, to be honest. I don't work as much in green energy. I work in, I work with Indigenous communities in housing and energy efficiency. I can talk a little bit about the transition to renewables.
Sure.
I think Indigenous communities across the country are leading the way in terms of transitioning to renewable energy projects. There's some really great youth-led initiatives, and I know Indigenous Clean Energy, that partner I mentioned earlier, runs programs Bringing It Home Project Accelerator that helps support capacity at a community level in developing those projects across the country. There's energy storage happening, here in the West Coast, and Malahat has a big battery project underway, and there's community, I think what's important to remember, and I just sort of spoke about this, is that every community is so unique and different, and a distinctions-based approach is really essential, not only for First Nation communities, but for Métis settlements and Inuit as well. And I think, sometimes people try to pan-Indigenize frameworks or ways forward, and it has to be done and Indigenous-led, and the needs are so different. So meeting communities where they're at with that transition is incredibly important. But I've been really inspired by the role of youth, and youth play such a strong role in community, and climate change is impacting them first and foremost because they are the leaders of today and tomorrow. And I'm very proud of the work that they've been doing on projects on the ground.
In terms of our youth, the one thing that we could do is to start advocating for for high schools on our reserves. Even my community of 25,000 Mohawks, we don't have a high school. So then all of our children have to go off reserve to go to high school. And that means that they get their curriculum through Ontario and through New York State. And none of our needs, our strategic plans, is reflected in any of the teachings that the curriculum that they get. So then they graduate and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. And then they go to, maybe they go to school or they go do a trade, and it's not really relevant education. So we need to figure out how to improve the education of our Indigenous youth to be able to be part of this movement, because right now we're not giving them the tools to engender that powerful voice.
Yeah, and I hear so much in working with youth. I used to run an Indigenous youth internship program with the BC Public Service, and it's amazing, how many youth are concerned about climate impacts and how that's affecting mental health. We already have high rates of suicide. I grew up with a class of 32 people from kindergarten to grade 12, and I've lost 13 of my class members. So I've been to more funerals than I have been weddings since I was young. And it's a huge concern. And in terms of response to mental health and its implications, time on land is so important. So that severance from land and from culture, that revitalization is so integral to mitigating and responding to climate change as well.
And I just wanted to say that we are not looking at how the new green revolution and green opportunities and greening the energy is affecting the previous pollution that's in those spaces. And that's why Akwesasne is so important. We have to understand that there's already pollution there. And if we don't have a focus on figuring out how that pollution is going to be redistributed and re-expose these communities nearby, which are mostly Indigenous, then we're even worse off because of the greening of society. And that's why it's so important to have these stories. This is what's happening in lots of hydro electric dams up in northern Canada, where there's nobody except Indigenous people. So we really have to think about the externalities that we haven't paid attention to in the past.
Thank you both so much for your incredible words and sharing with us today. So much to think about, and I'd love to continue the conversation again in the future. Maria, thank you for coming and being our guest today as well. I'll pass it back to Melissa, who's going to usher us into our break. But I want to thank you and give an applause to both of you for spending your time with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A pleasure as always, and edifying as always to listen to you talk, Dr. Horn Ojisto, and thank you so much, Maria, for joining us. So we originally were supposed to end or take a break at 11:30 PST. It's now 11:37 PST. So we're thinking maybe we'll shorten our break to 10 minutes or I guess 13 minutes and come back at like 11:50 instead of 11:45. How does that sound? Okay. So we'll take a little break now and we'll come back at 11:50 sharp and keep chatting. Thanks.
I was expecting 6 to 7 more people, so we're
I'm unmuting our room here. Okay, thanks for coming back. And we're next going to move into regional committee reports, starting with Tanette DeVoe, who's our regional program manager and coordinator for Atlantic Canada.
Hi, everybody. I'm speaking to you from Chibuktuk, or Halifax, as you may know it. And so our presenters all know the order we're going in, but just to give the rest of you a sense of what we're going to do next, we're going to hear from a representative from each of the regional committees. And after the first 5, we'll pause to see if anybody has any questions. And then we'll hear from the next 4 and again, have time for questions. So we're asking everyone to take 3 to 4 minutes for their presentation. The guiding questions that we've offered are: what's one of your proudest moments from the past year? Yeah, there we go. All right, they're all up on the screen. And at the end, we hope to have a few minutes to talk about how CAPE can support the regional committees in more ways going forward. So our first presenter is from Newfoundland, and that's Stephanie Atkinson. Stephanie is the chair of the Newfoundland committee. And Stephanie, I think when we get to the 3-minute mark, I'll just put up my finger to tell you there's 1 minute left. Okay, over to you.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephanie Atkinson. My internet's been fine all day, but it was just breaking up a little bit when Tanette was speaking, so hopefully this is not going to be a problem. I am in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we are on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk people, the Beothuk who we have sadly lost culturally forever. We also are the ancestral lands for the Innu and Inuit people. I want to highlight first, I guess, one of the things I'm most proud of this year is some of the connections that we've made. Specifically, we have made a connection with the NLHS and have helped to form a steering committee for sustainable healthcare. Second, with Choosing Wisely NL, and that one is the one I really want to highlight because some really big news came out of that. We have, or NLHS, I guess, will be announcing in December that they will no longer be purchasing desflurane, which is one of the more damaging anesthetic gases. And so I think that we'll be the first province to actually ban it provincially. And I do have permission to share that, even though it hasn't been officially announced yet. The second question, which is something that we've struggled with this year, I think our biggest struggle this year has been with engagement. And that seems to have turned around in the last couple of months. We've acquired some new members, but for whatever reason, it just seemed to be a bit of a dud of a year in terms of kind of new membership, but also engaging some of our more regular, or those who had been our more regular members. And so we're hoping, I guess, to turn that around in the new year. And then in terms of the something that we're kind of looking forward to is increased engagement with the rest of Atlantic Canada. And there has been discussion about starting a newsletter here in Atlantic Canada. And so I think that that would be something that would be really beneficial in terms of meeting our goals about engagement as well. Sort of hearing a bit more from how the other committees are doing that, how they're kind of reaching out to the sort of the further corners of their provinces. And we do have some challenges here with geography in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I think that's probably what I am, or we are looking forward to the most in the coming months. And then lastly, I guess I just want to say thank you to the organizers of today, because there's been a number of things that have been have resonated really significantly with me personally, but also has both sort of highlighted the seriousness of some stuff that we're dealing with, but also given us some hope going forward. So that's really all I have.
That's great, Stephanie. Thank you. So the next person is Linda from British Columbia.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I'm just hand waving up here in the Vancouver. These there. So sorry, I'm not on the screen. There, I reached out to the Cape BC group just to see what, okay, there I am on the screen, what the proud moments were, and it was hard to pick one. We had many proud moments. We came together every month for the regional committee meetings and then many times in between meetings as well on a whole variety of activities. So over the past year, Cape BC members have set up Cape tables at planetary health fairs, at medical conferences, at the Union of BC Municipalities annual gathering, at farmers markets in Vancouver and Victoria, and spoke to the public, to politicians, to our colleagues, and recruited many supporters. We delivered a 5th annual climate emergency conference for our medical colleagues. We held press conferences and media interviews in French and English to raise awareness around the healthcare costs of fossil gas. We brought much media attention to the health harms of an inadequate emergency response plan in the case of a tanker spill in the Burrard Inlet with the newly functional TMX pipeline expansion in the terminal. We marched with collaborating organizations at the global climate strike. We raised awareness to our medical colleagues on the health harms of plastics by hosting a screening of plastic people at BC Children's Hospital just this week. We spoke at city council meetings in a number of municipalities on Vancouver Island and the Lower Mainland on the health harms of natural gas, to pass bylaws to ban gas hookups out of new builds, to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, and to adopt the building energy step codes. We supported local and environmental Indigenous groups by bringing a health voice and advice to their concerns on the ongoing fossil fuel development projects, such as the PGRT pipeline and the Ksli Lisms plant, and brought similar health advice to the making of Dr. Liana Patrick's documentary, Nechako. We obtained funding to study flaring, the health impacts of flaring at the Woodfibre LNG plant, and collaborated with physicians in Northern Health on the respiratory health impacts of fracking, and published a variety of op-eds on a range of topics from health and climate change to the health harms of plastics. And we were also really proud to work with Cape Central on a variety of initiatives such as fossil fuel greenwashing, when we were thrilled to see many fossil fuel ads disappear overnight, and the successful Bill 226 legislating action on environmental racism, and the work on the new SEPA. As much as we had successful activities, we've had some challenges as well. This year, we saw attendance to the annual conference slide, reflecting a general public disinterest in climate change that we also saw at the farmers markets and rallies and in municipal governments' reversal of climate policies. We note a continuing development of fossil fuel infrastructure around the province, and specifically some pretty strong headwinds in our demands to reduce fossil gas production and use. In the next year, we look forward to welcoming new members and new alliances, and engaging more with medical organizations, governments, and schools. And we look forward to growing Cape BC's impact by bringing new strategies to ongoing issues and awareness and attention to new climate and environmental related issues.
Great. Thank you, Linda. All right. Next, we have Steve Wilton in Alberta. Steve?
Hi, everyone. Thanks. It's Steve here, coming from Calgary, Alberta, Treaty 7 territory. And it's my second time being here as now co-chair of Alberta Regional Committee. And we did have a really really excellent year in the last year. Asked to pick one of our proudest moments, I chose a really successful event that we participated in and community engagement in June of this past year. Calgary has a big urban festival in the spring called Lilac Fest, and we had a booth there and engaged with, literally hundreds of Calgarians and got them to write down their hopes and fears about climate change and collated those into an interesting document. Like the other committees, we have members who are active in a variety of other arenas, including having written op-eds and engaging with government and sometimes commercial leaders. So it's been a really good year. And in terms of challenges, similar to what we just heard from BC, I think we've noticed, and it bears out in polling, that climate and environmental issues, though we all think they're critical, have really fallen down the list of concerns for average Canadians. And also, I think for some of our healthcare colleagues, we have a great deal of instability in our healthcare system currently, related to government restructuring of the healthcare service model, and that's led to a lot of I think paralysis in terms of innovation and a lot of resource restrictions that are really kind of front and center for our frontline workers. That being said, we have noticed increasing attendance at our monthly meetings and increasing, I think, engagement among the people who are coming. So starting this year, what I'm looking forward to is that I've been able to trick Julia Sawatsky, who is already a Cape Board member, into being co-chair with me. And I think having her as well as our new regional coordinator, Rhiannon, who has been really fantastic so far, has really allowed us to sort of speed up and amp up our activities this year. So we've already, I think, accomplished more in terms of writing and engagement and starting to work on policy requests with our city than we've had probably all of last year. So things are really looking up with our regional committee, and I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Next from Saskatchewan, and please correct me if I mispronounce your name, Candelaria? Yeah, okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Conde. I'm co-chair for Cape Saskatchewan along with Dr. Murray Optel, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it today. And I'm actually a fourth-year medical student at USask at the Regina site, which is on Treaty 4 territory. And there was two successes this year that I think I wanted to touch on today. So one of our big successes was that we have had a glove recycling project running for about 2.5 years. This project was started by Dr. Henny Rees. She's one of the pathologists in Saskatoon. And it's based out of her home pathology site. And over the last 1.5 years or so, we've kind of been working on getting funding for her. And this year we were actually able to secure some continuous Saskatchewan Health Authority funding for her, at least at her site, which I think was a small but big success on our part. And that's a project that I think as a group we've been working on, and we're going to continue to do some work. We're working on maybe putting a publication out and things like that. But that was one of our big successes. And then another thing that I think we've been quite excited about at Cape Sask is that we have a really large student representation. I'm the third medical student, I think, who's been co-chair, which is, I think, really unique and exciting for myself. But we've actually had lots of medical students reaching out, expressing interest, which I think is exciting in terms of the future of Cape Sask. But given that we have that large student population, we have been able to have some successes in terms of we have a large screening anesthesia group, which a lot of the students are working on infographics and kind of reaching out and increasing knowledge in terms of that. But this year we were also able to get extreme heat event and climate change lecture incorporated into the undergraduate medical education curriculum. And we are going to repeat that lecture this year, which I think was quite exciting. In terms of some of the challenges, I think even though we have really wonderful student representation. That's maybe also an area where we're kind of doing some work. We would really like to have more physician involvement. Even though we have really wonderful physicians who are always present and always at the meetings, we just, I think, are trying to grow our group a little bit. And that's been something that we found to be a little bit difficult. But I think that's kind of the direction for this year, is just trying to increase our reach and increase knowledge of CAPE and CAPE SASC within our province, and trying to get people a bit more excited. And that's honestly all I really have to share. Sorry if that was a little rambly. I'm an anxious public speaker.
You were great. So thank you. All right, next to Manitoba and Anne Lowen.
Hi there. I'm Anne, and I'm in Winnipeg on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, and Dene people, and also the traditional homeland of the Manitoba Métis. And we acknowledge the harms of the past and working together to engage with truth and reconciliation commitments and towards a better future together. So we've had, as many have already indicated, ups and downs this past year, but the proudest moment, as we were asked to describe, was, I would say, April 4th and the lead up to it, in which we were one of a number of parties who were taking part in the Citizens Climate Lobby, which was involving one-on-one engagement with MLAs, Manitoba's member of the Legislative Assembly, their aides, and it included 14 in attendance of the MLAs, 4 of their aides, and we had numerous citizens groups, and 4 physicians came, working physicians who gave up their regular daytime hours to do presentations and to speak to MLAs. We've had several follow-up meetings, and we look to continued ongoing engagement. So our most significant challenge in 2024, as others have articulated, is getting the busy and overcommitted Manitoba physicians to engage, show up, and take part in activities. People have lots of ideas and they're personally quite committed, but they have trouble taking on additional activities and responsibilities. And I can only do so much myself. So I hope that we will make progress in that regard. And I listen to other groups for inspiration and motivation to help us find projects that are worthy of our membership in the population and the cause. So in that light, I'm very much looking forward in the coming year to working, first of all, with Rhiannon Fox, the new coordinator for Western Manitoba, and she's already got us very much on board with submitting a proposal to the City of Winnipeg to encourage them to study the reduction and eventual elimination of natural gas. That motion did not pass, but there was a lot of citizen participation, and we look forward to more work in this area, and we couldn't have done it without Rhiannon. We also would like to do more engagement with the community, with the public, and 2 events that are very much on the horizon for 2025 are a cycling active transportation event that Patty Weens, the bike mayor of Winnipeg, has offered to organize. We kind of just have to show up and share our name and our participation to the event. So that should be fun. And also the Family Medicine Forum for the National Canadian Association, Canadian College of Family Physicians is in Winnipeg in 2025. And we look forward to having a booth that will allow us to engage directly with other physicians at that time. So that's my report. And great to hear from so many people from across Canada and with CAPE.
That's great. Thank you. So before we go on to the next 4 presenters, I just want to ask if anyone has questions about anything that has been mentioned so far. Do you have any questions for our representatives and the activities that they're about the activities that they've mentioned.
I can't put my hand up here. I'm just going to speak on the Vancouver
Yes.
thing. I actually have a question for Steve in Alberta. You seem to be the only person who mentioned that your membership has increased, and engagement has increased. So what do you think is responsible for that?
It's a good question. I think a lot of the new members have been med students and residents. So I think young people are super engaged. But also we've had a few new members this year who are recently retired physicians. So it is actually a whole spectrum of people. Yeah, we haven't seen so many of the mid-career people now joining. Julia, do you have any other comments about that?
Not too much to add, Steve. I agree. I think medical students and other committees have mentioned that there's huge interest, and it's a really cool group of people to work with because they have so much to envision for kind of healthcare going forward, and lots of really cool ideas, lots of energy. So that's definitely a good group to kind of look to try and increase engagement, I think, and trying to figure out how to like engage with their curricula or what's happening at their level seems to have been working really well.
I'm going to add a quick comment, which is I wonder if Julia, for example, you are one of the reasons why, and Conde too, like if you are one of the reasons why, like when they see people like them, like learners in positions of power, that attracts more of them to the, to work with you. So anyway, kudos to all the learners who are helping to lead CAPE so ably.
Great. All right, next we have Anne and then Renee.
Hi, I was wondering if Candela would be able to share any of resources, contacts, supports for the glove recycling idea. I think that might be a good project for our province to take on too.
I can send you an email with some of the stuff that we have, and then hopefully once we're able to kind of put together our write-up, I'd be really happy to share that with the CAPE group in general. But I will reach out to you after.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Renee?
My question is for Anne from Manitoba. You mentioned you did work with the government. What was the answer from them?
Maybe. Right? So what we did, the organization is called Citizens Climate Lobby, and they were actually very instrumental, for example, in the carbon tax implementation as a way, the carbon tax rebate. When the carbon tax was first proposed, there wasn't a rebate as part of the whole mechanism, and they were the ones who pushed for that. Now it's had its obviously areas of success, more and not so successful, but that is the Citizens Climate Lobby initiative. So in this regard, they helped us organize and mobilize and did a lot of the legwork to have a one-on-one lobbying day event. All MLAs were invited, and a certain number came, not all of them came, but quite a few, and from both of our major parties. What it more resulted was increased education level and an opportunity for us lobbyists, activists, to speak directly to a number of MLAs. Has it had a tangible effect? Hard to say. Even with an NDP government, I don't feel like we're making a lot of progress in our province, but we have to keep chipping away. So if Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, notifies anyone that they're having a provincial event, that's kind of how they work. We had a breakfast and speakers, and they organized the room, and they contacted the MLAs, and it was a chance to one-on-one speak directly to a lot of MLAs.
Great.
We'll see. Maybe by next year, I'll be able to report on effects.
All right. And I see there's one more question there from Steve, but Steve, I'm going to suggest that we include that at the end of the next round of presentations, because I'm sure all of our presenters may have some thoughts on that. All right. So next we're going to go to Millie Roy in Ontario.
Hi there. I'm Millie Roy. I'm one of the co-chairs for Cape Ontario, and my other co-chair is currently away, Dr. Sejal Vargava, and we have Tyler Rouse sitting in for Sejal today. And I normally live and work on the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, but coming at you from Sabrina's basement today. So certainly in the Ontario Regional Committee, we've got a lot of work, a lot of initiatives going on. Everything ranging from looking at heat-related deaths to we've also done partnered with Citizens Climate Lobby and done breakfast at Queen's Park, our provincial legislative assembly. But we thought we would choose a couple of different initiatives, and Tyler and I will sort of work back and forth on that. So one of the big achievements that we're proud of at the Ontario Committee has been our work on gas. And we've sort of come at it from a couple of different facets because in this province, we have been looking at an expansion in gas-fired electricity procurements that were planned by the provincial government, and CAPE, in partnership with a number of other organizations as well, really ran a prolonged and relatively successful campaign. And we were able to actually block the expansion of multiple gas-fired electricity plants that had been proposed and actually disrupted the procurement plans of the government. So that's maybe one win that we had. Unfortunately, subsequently, we're seeing a lot of that money sort of going into nuclear instead. But when we ran the gas campaign, it's nice to be able to talk about some wins, and that's something we're proud of. Subsequent to that, the government here also entrenched some legislation, Bill 162, that would sort of entrench gas supply into homes, into the built environment. And we have been advocating against that. Thus far, no wins, but that's something we can continue to work on. And I'm going to turn it over to Tyler to talk about another one of our sort of proudest achievements.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. So I'm Tyler. I am a pathologist in Stratford, Ontario. I've been tasked with speaking about a project that's called Growing Sustainable Physicians, and that's born out of our Agri-Food Working Group as part of our Cape Ontario Regional Group. And what that program is, it's an educational program for residents where they teach them about the climate crisis and about the climate and health impacts of food systems. And they break that down into 3 parts. Well, I should say, actually, this is entirely funded through a grant through U of T's Faculty of Medicine, so it doesn't cost the residents anything. But there's 3 components. So the first is a workshop, which was held in the late summer in Lyndhurst and Toronto at a couple of farms. Then they have a QI project that they work with a mentor through over the year. And then at the end of that, there's a capstone event where they present their work.
I believe we just lost Tyler.
Okay, we'll see. Can everybody hear me? We'll see whether Tyler makes his way back in because he had some more information for you. But yes, this has been a really successful launch of the Agri-Foods program, and something that we'll be carrying on, and we hope to see it grow. And now Tyler was also going to present, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to tell if he's coming back on. He's gone. Okay. So that's unfortunate because he was going to sort of look at or present to you some of the challenges that we've been facing based on feedback directly from our group. And unfortunately, I was away for the last meeting. But I had sort of prepared an answer of my own, and which is really, I think that we've been very fortunate at Cape Ontario to have good intake of new members. And I think one of the main challenges is how do we best harness all of the potential capabilities, interests, interests, energies of all our members and really, achieve the most that we can as a regional committee. If Tyler makes his way back on, he may be able to give you a little bit more feedback that he got directly from our group. And in terms of what we're most looking forward to, again, as I said, I think we're very lucky to be getting new members. A big thank you to our regional coordinator, Michael Adamson, who really does one-on-one intake with new members. I think that's really helped. And I look forward to us being a more cohesive group and sort of, bonding as we work collaboratively on new projects going forward.
That's great. And if Tyler comes back, he can join in during the discussion period after the presentations, the remaining presentations. So next, if from Quebec, we're going to hear from Patricia Clermont. And Patricia is the project or the Quebec organizer. And you wear so many hats, I'm not even going to try and explain them all. And I apparently, because we don't have translation for this portion, Patricia will do the presentation in English for folks. So thank you.
So hi, so please forgive my English, maybe a little slow by sometimes, but among our many achievements over the past year, ACME has launched its framework on air, a framework of reference on air in February with the support of 14 medical associations, professional orders, unions, and other organizations, sending us an official letter of support. And we've been solicited for several articles and reports in the media, written open letters on the subject, made speeches at conference, even this week. We are lobbying the government and the opposition party to ensure that Quebec revises its air quality standards in line with the World Health Organization and adopts a national clean air strategy. Also, we advocate for the protection of natural environment and the promotion of nature's co-benefits for health, obviously, in connection with land use planning and sustainable mobility in Montreal, Rimouski, Châteauguay, and Rosemère. We have produced brief in connection with urban planning in Montreal, Quebec City, and soon in the Montreal metropolitan community. We are also actively involved in the Sortons le Gaz Coalition, supported by the Trottier Family Foundation. We have co-signed several press releases, are involved in many committees. We have taken part in political representation and worked against greenwashing, which notably led the Société Transport de Montréal to stop advertising fossil fuels, like Toronto. We are also part of the Regroupement des organismes environnementaux sur l'énergie, and we are also taking part in the monthly gas bans called hosted by Stand Earth and funded also by the Trottier family. We are also continuing to develop our community of practice on sustainable and carbon neutral care, for which we're awaiting 3 years funding from the Institut National de Santé Publique du Québec. And we've secured funding for the next 3 years from the Trottier Family Foundation to accelerate the phase out of HFA inhalers and several anesthetist gases. We also participate in the Viro Vert Coalition, which is involved in various elections. So for several months now, we have been preparing for the next federal election, launching the Consensus Québécois en Environnement, and meeting with the various parties to ensure that their platform respect this consensus. ACME participates in these representation with Équiterre, which leads this coalition. And we are also taking part in the CANRAC French language appeal, and once again took part in the panel organized by the Dialogue sur le climat held during the COP29. So to finish, ACME pays tribute to the 11 Aboriginal peoples who, long before the French and British, interacted with each other on Quebec territory. and with whom we work and reflect with other groups, particularly in Quebec's environmental community. The ACME is also delighted to be more and more invited to broadcast on Asian Community Radio on Montreal. So that's it for me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. All right, next we're going to go to Laurette Gelden Hughes, and I know I'm mispronouncing that, but you can.
Perfect.
in Nova Scotia.
And I'm going to try and share my screen. I don't know if it's working. Looks like it's working. Wonderful. And whoopsie, I'm on the wrong slide here. Can everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
Great. So in order not to take too long, I decided to just stick to the period from August 30th to November 23rd. And rather than picking one proudest moment, I thought to just highlight a few of the things we're involved in to give people a flavor of what we're doing. So successes, I don't have it on here, but membership, just because people have spoken about membership, our membership continues to grow. We now have almost 100 members in Nova Scotia, and a variable number of members participate in our meetings and in our activities. And our membership includes physicians, but also other healthcare professionals. And it's across the spectrum from learners all the way to middle career physicians all the way to retired physicians, and they're all making a great contribution. So I don't have any complaints. I'm absolutely delighted. So now I'll just quickly zip through a few activities that we were involved in the fall. So one highlight was participating with a wonderful Ecology Action Center in electrification of school buses, and an advocacy project for that. And there were various activities, a panel and our table at a public event, an information toolkit, and also writing a letter to provincial party leaders for the upcoming provincial election about electric school buses. We also participated with the Ecology Action Center in an op-ed. It hasn't quite been published, but we're hoping someone will see it on climate change and the Nova Scotia election. We participated in Seniors for Climate Day of Action, Electric Mobility Canada, a local presentation on Green Labs. We participated in a publication on Green Lab certification. And I particularly want to highlight this wonderful climate emergency jumpstart kit that one of our members, who's also in the meeting, I believe, Nava Shetty. She's one of the co-authors together with Miles Sargent of the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare. I sent to the Cape community a link to this toolkit, and it's having a lot of a great reception in Nova Scotia. Then there's some ongoing projects. So I'm extremely excited about our advocacy project to protect Sandy Lake. As part of that, we've just completed a study on the health effects of nature. And I'd love to tell you much more about it, but we don't have time. But I'm deeply grateful. CAPE is funding part of it. The Ecology Action Center is funding part of it. And the Department of Pathology in Halifax is also funding it. And the results look really good. And we're excited to write it up. We've completed a draft of a Cascades AP Green Lab playbook, and we're already planning to present it at a number of fora. And then several of our members are participating in the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare's Preparing Canada's Healthcare Buildings for Net Zero project, which has just been successfully funded by Environment and Climate Change Canada. We also have had some great guests at our monthly meetings. We had presentations on nuclear power, renewable energy, and sustainable events. The challenges, the main challenge is the accelerating climate crisis, the world being just too slow to react to it, the lack of action from governments at all level internationally, what's happening in different elections and so on. So one can go to some pretty dark places somewhere, but it is enormously helpful to participate, to be active and participate in this wonderful AGM and to see the wonderful annual report that Kate put together. So we are it's very grateful to be able to participate in this, and we're looking forward to continue to work with all our partners and all the projects that I've mentioned that we're already working on, and I'm sure there'll be new projects and new opportunities to present themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurette. All right, next to New Brunswick, and we're Renee Turcotte.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for staying this late. I'm talking from Moncton, the Mi'kmaq territory, and the ancestral traditional homeland. And also on New Brunswick, we have the Wolastoqey and the Passamaquoddy. I'll give you a few of the things we've done, the work we've done this year. One of the proud moment is the work we have done with the New Brunswick Anti-Shale Gas Alliance, the NADSCA, the New Brunswick Long and Kane and Cape, to produce a letter on the effect of fracking on health. The letter that was sent in May to the New Brunswick Premier, all ministers and other MLAs and party leaders, as well as a press release. And we also gave an interview at CTV News, and we had a coverage on 91.9 The Bend. We gave another interview to New Brunswick Media Co-op in September or October on the same subject before the election. On October, we organized and participated to a webinar with New Brunswick Long and NADSCA on fracking with your health. We also participated to a webinar on Senior Day on the effect of climate change on seniors' health, as well as give an interview at Shift on CBC Radio. In May, we prepared a webinar on green hydrogen that was given by Mo Crarish from New Brunswick Conservation Council. To finish with, two of our second-year medical students, Caroline Doucet and Jérémy Didier, who has been followed for a documentary during their medical study years. They were filmed at one of our tables during Earth Day in April, the one at the Medical Formation Center at Université de Moncton. And that part has been selected to be included in the documentary realized by Julien Cadieux, who is a well-known documentarist in l'Acadie, in Quebec, in Canada, France, and USA. And he had won many awards with his films. This is another good publicity for CAPE. Significant challenges we faced. The most significant challenge was the election and making sure fracking was not on the radar by asking for a permanent ban. Luckily, we had a change in government. And also another challenge was to continue to increase our number, although it has been increased with more medical students, but we're still working on that. So what we are most looking forward in the coming year is to work with the new government on green renewable energy, bracket without nuclear and hydrogen, and also working on green healthcare. And on that, we have the support of the New Brunswick Medical Society. Another challenge is electrical buses across Atlantic. We work with a kind of a coalition, and also the coming federal election next year. So this will be great job to be done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Renee. Tyler, do you want a couple of minutes to continue your presentation, and then we'll go to questions and discussion.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I cut out again, I apologize. I'm gonna have to tell, so perhaps the Wi-Fi is not great.
Sure.
That was pretty much the end of the program discussion. I just put the link to a YouTube sales pitch video as well as their website, which can give you more information. It's the first year of it. We're hoping to get some interesting projects from the students and hearing about those soon. I don't know if Millie spoke about challenges or things that we are proud of or looking forward to. We did have a meeting on Wednesday with our regional group, and so I can report back some of the challenges that we were feeling was about political leaders not understanding the effects of air pollution on health, the issues in Ontario with greenwashing of LNG and so-called natural gas. And maybe many of you heard about Bill 212, which is basically removing bike lanes, which is obviously going backwards, which I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate. So feeling a little frustration with that, but we're continuing to do our work as much as we can. And we've had some great moments this year as well, as I'm sure Millie highlighted too. So that's it for me. And thank you all for listening and for all the good work that you do. And happy to answer questions if there are any.
That's great. So now we can open it up to questions, for all the presenters. But if there are some specifically for the last 4 presentations, maybe we can begin there.
That's the way that preparing for the election. If they meet with the Quebec caucus of each federal party.
Yeah, there's a that right there. Right there. I will think the red button.
Hi, Doug Quartermash in Vancouver. I have a question for Patrice from Quebec about your election preparation. Do you meet with the provincial caucus of each federal party? Like, how do you relate to federal politicians in your province? And what advice could you give the rest of us if it's working?
Well, I thank you for your question. Well, in fact, Verovar has been working in the Quebec election in like 2 years ago and will be active for the next municipal election next fall. For this federal election, where until now we spoke with the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois. We're still waiting for the Liberal to find some time for us and the NPD. And we didn't have news from the Green Party, I think. And for this election, that's the level where we're at to inform their platform. Not in every, like in Quebec, we don't talk to provincial parties about that. We have too much work to do with the federal parties. I hope this answers your question.
Interesting.
And if I may, I'm sorry,
Sure.
I just remembered the other part of your question. Well, we noticed when we launched at the press conference that the media were eager to know if we were scared for the next election, or, they're always trying to maybe do some gaslighting about that, but our perspective is to talk about common sense as defined as we have to protect nature and health altogether. This should be the new common sense. So that's what we are working for, and we are particularly careful to be nonpartisan and to speak to everybody. So that could be an advice for you all.
Great, thank you. I think Leah is next.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry I've had my camera off all day. I've been very, very ill, so I've been mostly listening in the background. But my question is to all of the regional committees. We heard from BC how they were, when possible, standing in solidarity with different Indigenous and place-based movements. And my question is essentially, how do you see, especially as CAPE moves to focus justice more on its work? And I'm curious of how do you see your members' interest or engagement to support place-based movements that are kind of fighting on the front lines against different toxic projects, fossil fuel extractive projects? Is that something you're already engaging in a lot, or see as something you like that there's interest to engage in more. So it's just basically a broad question about that I'm curious.
Why don't I jump in and answer for KBC because Linda has left already. Yes, so this is a very important focus for us. And in fact, I don't know if the rest of KBC knows, but I think it's been 3 summers running now, 3 summers falls, we've been buying ad space on either buses or billboards, kind of framing the planetary health crisis and LNG in a certain way. And this coming year, I think Rhiannon knows, we're planning to try to organize a larger campaign around health protectors, not just doctors standing against LNG, but bringing in Indigenous health protectors who have already started, who are already doing some amazing advocacy work, like the Gittinyao Hereditary Chiefs, Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs, and actually kind of doing a joint advertising advocacy campaign with them. It'll take work. It'll take a lot of communication and working together towards similar goals, but absolutely, it's something we're definitely interested in doing out here in BC.
Yeah, I would just add, this is Tim, also in Vancouver. We take opportunities like the Prince Rupert gas transmission line, where Indigenous communities are asking us to help them with submission, for example, in this case on the on the pipeline and emissions from the pipeline compressor plant. But the regulatory environment provides a lot of opportunities, since many of the energy projects are sited on unceded lands.
Yeah, so Tim's been doing amazing work, particularly Tim and Margaret, along with different research partners in Northern BC around this, basically being responsive when asked. And it requires a certain level of expertise, which not every committee probably has. But when it's there, it's very powerful to form these partnerships and stand behind and beside Indigenous leaders who are trying to do what we all should be doing.
I just want to bring in Steve's question, maybe in this here as well. He was asking about how you engage physicians in rural communities. Anyway, if people can also maybe reflect on whether the engagements you're having in Indigenous communities are also opening up any pathways to connecting with physicians in those areas, and more broadly, whether your committees are having some success reaching beyond the city centers. And this is for any committee that may want to jump in. Patricia, your hand is up.
So maybe I will talk more about citizen mobilization, which are central to the protection of natural spaces in Quebec. All files that we're in is from that type of mobilization, be it in Montreal or in the in Rimouski, in the North Shore and the South Shore. So it's always because we're responding to a coalition of citizens. And also in the gas work, particularly the Coalition Sortons le Gaz has an important part of this work done in municipalities to help them have gain some leverage in that important work. So, and we're also participating in what we call the Large Coalition in Energy. So it's about all kinds of energies. And we have a great tradition here in Quebec of mobilization all throughout Quebec, which led to combat other projects like Énergie Est during 10 years, and also in the nuclear energy.
Thanks. And we'll go to Vancouver next.
Hi, it's Tim Tuccaro again, and that was a great segue because I wanted to ask about the nuclear question and how the different committees are managing that. I'm really impressed with the work that the Atlantic provinces are doing to stop fossil energy, but also concerned because Nova Scotia, for example, removed their nuclear moratorium. And yeah, so I'm curious about how you're navigating those challenging waters.
Renee, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I can answer. We've been part, two of our member, three, have been part of a group to study the sustainability of the development of the ARCS model and the other, the small SMRs. And this project now is on hold because it has been studied now is at a second or third phase. And we're still waiting to continue to work on that, to work against the development of SMR in New Brunswick. But I think this project now is not on the radar of the government because it's very, very onerous, expensive. And I think other provinces like Ontario are jumping ahead New Brunswick. So I think New Brunswick, fortunately, will have to stop the project, but I'm not sure. But we're still following that. We're still working on against the development of nuclear. And as you might not know, our nuclear plan is off work since April. And at least it costs, I heard, between 100,000 to 400,000 million every day to keep it, to try to improve it. Anyway, to keep it not working. And it produced 30 to 40% of electricity in New Brunswick. So we've been out of that nuclear plant since April.
This is the Point Lepreau generating station that was supposed to be undergoing maintenance for a very short period. And it's just keeps steamrolling ahead and is costing the province millions and millions, and they're having to import more and more fossil fuel. Okay, we've got to wrap up soon, but I see Vancouver's hand up. And then
I think that's an old hand. We're going to put our hand down. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Anjali?
Thanks. Anjali actually put her hand up for myself.
Okay.
Yes, and just to respond to Renee's comment regarding nuclear in Ontario, that yes, I mean certainly Cape Ontario has been concerned not only about new nuclear development. So I sort of alluded to the fact that after our successful campaign to sort of disrupt gas procurement in our grid here, we're now hearing about money that's already gone sort of behind closed doors to nuclear expansion. But the other thing that we were wanting to engage with is the Chalk River waste disposal site that's also in the works. And this is maybe a good opportunity, to raise the question. We know that Cape, after a fairly lengthy study, came up with a stance, against nuclear, but we haven't been sure, how actively under the moniker of Cape we can go ahead and really get behind opposing some of these developments. So that would be wonderful to have a little bit more clarity from Cape National for some of the RCs, who would like to, I think, engage in this, a little bit more actively. And we haven't really been sure how much support we have there from Cape National.
Okay, Ogisto, I don't know if you want to speak to this or say something else, but
it's a really good segue to a point that I was thinking, and that is that when we have always been at the very front of any kind of environmental concerns, and because we haven't had strong allyship, we're actually called activists, and we are looked at really negatively. So in terms of rural areas, I'm pretty sure that in most rural areas, there are Indigenous people who've already been well aware of the environmental concerns. And that is an opportunity to engage together with a common focus, a common goal. And then that would be something we could bring to the caucus. Because certainly we don't live in isolation in many of these places. So that's the point I wanted to say. Because I know for Chalk River, for example, the people from Maniwaki who, you know, are on the Quebec side even, but they're the same people. They participated in some of that engagement with the press to bring awareness to the problem. So we would have much stronger outcomes and strength if we figured out how to create these allegiances between the local Indigenous populations and these rural areas about a common environmental concern.
That's great. I also think that's perfect spot to end, perfect message to end on. That brings us to an hour for this conversation. So, Sabrina, do you want us to take a few more minutes, or should we hand off to the next section?
I think we'll have to stop here, but I do really appreciate everybody's contributions. It's very clear that the regional committees have so much to share, have so many interesting questions, challenges, and successes, and I'm really glad we got to profile those today. So thank you, and thank you to Net and her team, Michael and Rhiannon and Patricia, for all of the work you're doing on regional committees. There's lots more to come, and a lot more exciting things on the horizon with CAPE and our work in the region. So please stay tuned for that. Much of that has been spearheaded by Tanette and her team. I want everyone to take a little stretch right now. We're almost at the end of our day, and we have just one more really exciting piece, and I'm so delighted about this. So we are now going to take a few minutes, about 15 to 20 minutes, to go into some breakout rooms with each of our campaigns. We really wanted you all to have an opportunity to have a little bit of a one-on-one with our campaigners. Our campaigners are going to talk a little bit about an overview of where they're at, some of the difficulties they've faced, some of their successes, and where they're headed. That'll be about 10 minutes. And then the audience is going to be encouraged to sort of ask questions, discuss, share thoughts. All rooms will be in English, except for one. La salle 5, c'est en français avec Patricia. And I will just share where everybody is going here. Wilson, our tech moderator, is going to share in the chat, if he hasn't already, sort of how it works to join a room. You will have to select the room yourself, just so you know. But room 1, preventing toxic exposures and our place-based power project. Room 2, healthy futures, climate and fossil fuel ads make us sick. Room 3, engagement and physician training and our advocacy and mobilization program. And as we mentioned, this is a new area for us, so we're really excited to have you to have some ideas and bandy around some thoughts on physician engagement. 4 will be regional committees if you want to talk a little bit more about that. And 5, as I said, c'est une salle sur Québec ACME et c'est en français. So we'll give you all a few minutes to join. Once the breakout rooms get started, we will have a chat, and then we will come back here right at the end just for a quick summary and goodbye for the end of our day. All right, so I will encourage the breakout rooms to start, and you can go join one. And the rooms are open, so please go ahead.
Can you remind me what the name of the rooms are? Which ones are which?
Yeah, absolutely. Room 1 is preventing toxic exposures. Yeah, they're just right on the slide here. Yeah. Whichever one you want. If you're having trouble, Wilson, our tech person, can help put you in a room if you're not sure how to get in there.
How do you get in?
There are instructions in the chat, but if you have trouble, Wilson can help.
All right, thank you. I'll look in the chat. Okay, how do I do this?
Nope, I have no idea how to do this.
Okay. Which room would you like to be in, Ojisto?
I was thinking Quebec.
Sabrina, are you seeing me here in the main room?
I'm not sure.
Can you put me in the breakout room on my laptop?
Oh, Kimia, I cannot, but Wilson can.
Oh,
Wilson.
I think I can send myself. 1 second.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What are I'm sorry, I think I'm gonna just leave because I cannot figure out how to do
Oh,
this.
we can help you. What room do you want to go into?
Number 5.
Okay, the Quebec. Wilson, can you put Ojisto in room number 5, please? I'm gonna let him take it over from here.
Vancouver, you're muted. I can.
Take over the meeting. Sorry, close, but we should have continue to talk after the meeting.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
This is gonna be like two seconds. Okay, I really hope everyone had a great discussion. I know we had a great discussion with Kimia here in the engagement room that we're gonna continue after this meeting ends, but it's my job to wrap up for the day, just like I did the AGM. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for sticking around and for being part of this incredible organization that is CAPE. And I want to, it's so interesting. I've traveled all around the country to give planetary health talks and attend different meetings this year. And whether it was in Halifax or Ottawa or Toronto or Saskatoon or Banff or Calgary, literally friendly CAPE members would either pop up out of the woodwork or reach out beforehand and say hi. And every time that happened, it made me feel like I was at home, even when I wasn't at home. And I hope that's what CAPE is increasingly feeling like for you now. A place where you can connect and collaborate with like-minded friends and colleagues, and a place that you can feel like is your home when it comes to action and advocacy on planetary health. So thank you again for joining us today. Take some time to rest and recharge this upcoming holiday season. Don't forget to get outside into nature and stretch your legs this weekend, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye.